Chapter 993. Both of them had given in one after the other, and this was the result they got. If Kong Luoyue had used the soul-concealing needle, he would still have been defeated. Even if Shi Wuchen had won this match, he would not be able to continue today and could no longer compete with the others. Yin Yang was pleased with the result, but he did not say anything or make any comments. He dismissed it with a smile and ordered, "Team 2. In his heart, however, he thought, Shi Wuchen held back first and pressed his sword against the throat in an instant. Victory was already in his grasp. Kong Luoyue actually did not have the chance to use the soul-concealing needle, but Shi Wuchen held back at that crucial moment. It's enough to show their brotherhood and consideration of the bigger picture. Kong Luoyue, on the other hand, gave up the final counterattack resolutely when he had the chance to turn the tables. He would rather lose and let his opponent have a chance to retaliate. It's also a sign of their brotherhood, a sign of righteousness. The two of them are quite good in terms of the overall situation, forming their own ravines. Their brotherhood is even more flawless. You can consider these two people to handle matters related to this aspect in the sect. Next, the battle between Shi Bujia and Tai Qingsang in the second team was even more eye-catching. One of them was called the Young Master of Black Mist while the other was called the Golden-Armed Scholar. Based on their nicknames alone, perhaps 9 out of 10 people would think that both of them were the kind of people with delicate features and slim physiques. However, the truth was just the opposite. Although the two of them had delicate features, their bodies were tall and sturdy. In any case, they were not thin at all. As soon as the two men started fighting, they fought mercilessly, causing the ground to shake and the mountains to shake. It was even more spectacular than the battle between Shi and Kong. If the residents of Nine Supreme's mountain guarding formation was not really powerful, it would have collapsed from the impact of the two men in just a few moves. The young master of Black Mist was completely hidden in a cloud of black mist, but there was not a trace of treachery in his moves. Each of his moves was powerful and heavy. The golden-armed scholar that Yun Yang had been longing for finally appeared before his eyes. Tai Qingsang flipped his sleeves, his hands and wrists glinting in a golden light. It was an invulnerable style as he faced Shi Bujia with his hands. Wherever his fists and palms passed, it was like a giant axe splitting a mountain. The god of thunder was enraged. Yin Yang's eyes were twitching uncontrollably. This scholar, this young master, every move, every move, every move, every move, every move, every move, the posture of a person who was not afraid of death. When the two of them met, it was as if they were old enemies from their previous lives coming together. Both of them were walking the path of absolute strength. When the battle reached a certain point, it was more straightforward. You use your sword, I use my hand. Everyone was facing each other head-on. There were no tricks at all. It didn't matter what kind of moves they used or what kind of movement techniques they used, all they did was boom 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 boom. Everyone watched with their mouths crooked and eyes slanted, and they were speechless. Golden light flashed and black mist rose. Finally, the young master of the dark mist was furious. What is your hand made of? How could it dent my heavy sword? I don't want to fight anymore. After saying those words, he admitted defeat and withdrew from the arena. Laughing, Tai Qingsang stretched out his golden hand and roared triumphantly, "This is my hand. Golden hand. Invincible." The spectators spat in unison, but when they looked at the two men again, their expressions were solemn. When the two of them were together, they fought fiercely, and the audience enjoyed watching them. However, if it was another person who fought against either of them, they would not have the confidence to win. This kind of fighting style was too wild, too extreme. How should they deal with it if they were to encounter it? Could their best skill deal with the opponent? Everyone was considering it with a slight frown. Obviously, they did not have much confidence. As the winner, Tai Qingsang strode away from the team and stood opposite Shi Wuchen, laughing. "Shi Wuchen, I'll beat you into a pile of meat later and let you live up to your name." Shi Wuchen sneered. "It's too early for you two," he snorted and turned his head away, completely ignoring Tai Qingsang's provocation. Yin Yang was deep in thought, thinking about how to settle these two men. Both Tai Qingsong and Shi Bujia are the aggressive type, and they can be said to be brave generals. In the future, it will be their duty to charge and break through enemy lines, kill generals, and seize flags. The war hall is the best choice. However, if we study their temperaments carefully, Shi Bujia is rough but meticulous, and he has some inner beauty. Tai Qingsong looks rough and unsophisticated, but in fact, he's a typical example of someone who pretends to be a pig to eat a tiger. Neither of them is completely brave. As Yin Yang fell into deep thought, the next team had already begun fighting. This time, it was Ren Xingguang and Guanuanyang. Ren Xingguang used a sword, and so did Guanuanyang. Swords were the most common weapons in the Bound of Universe. At least 6 out of 10 people would use swords, and half of the Demiurge Flawed 10 were swordsmen as well. However, there were differences in the use of swords. For example, Shi Wuchen and Ren Xingguang's swords belonged to the conventional style, while Guanuanyang's sword was not only much narrower, it was also much longer. The sword's form was different, and so were the styles. Ren Xingguang's fighting style was standard, his foundation evident in his simplicity, and was not inferior to Shi Wuchen's. However, it was not as if he did not have anything to rely on, as he yearned for Shi Wuchen's position as supreme sword. Guanuanyang's fighting style, on the other hand, was bizarre and unpredictable. Ren Xingguang might not even counterattack once out of 10 strikes, but once he did, it would be a highly threatening and targeted ruthless move. Eternal Heaven's assassin lives up to his name. Yin Yang snapped out of his thoughts and watched the battle between the two men. It only took him a moment to figure out the key to the battle's outcome. Yin Yang quickly came to a conclusion. The two combatants were probably well aware of the outcome of the battle and had a rough idea of what was going to happen. Ren Xingguang's fighting style was open and straightforward, like a thunderbolt. He had displayed his swordsmanship to its fullest and was commendable. Guanuanyang's counterattack was incisive, but he was an assassin after all. What he was best at was attacking from the dark and killing with a single strike. Therefore, there was basically no advantage to speak of in a head-on battle like this. If Guanuanyang were to ambush Ren Xingguang in the dark, Ren Xingguang would never be able to escape Guanuanyang's fatal strike with external factors and his strategy. However, when it came to a head-on battle, Guanuanyang still had the ability to fight, but the difference in their strengths would grow as time went on. Eventually, he would be defeated. Ren Xingguang has comprehended sword will as well. His actual ability is on par with Shi Wuchen's. As for Guanuanyang, his position in the Dark Hall should be the most suitable. Yin Yang gradually came to a conclusion. The battle between the two men went on for another 10 minutes before Guanuanyang jumped out of the ring and asked for his elimination. "I'm not participating in the subsequent battles anymore. I'll withdraw from the 9 Supremes ranking battle directly." Guanuanyang chuckled humorlessly. "I'll only know how tough you fellows are after fighting with real weapons. I'm an assassin, fighting you guys in broad daylight is just me taking things too hard." Chapter 994. Everyone was stunned by Guanuanyang's words, awkwardness etched on their faces. No one spoke for a moment, obviously surprised by Guanuanyang's choice. Just as Guanuanyang had said, this seemingly fair battle for the 9 Supremes ranking had its inherent drawbacks to Guanuanyang, who was proficient in assassination. Facing such an awkward situation, Guanuanyang was not discouraged. Instead, he asked, "Boss Yun, can the residents of 9 Supremes set up a branch that specializes in assassination in the future?" Yin Yang chuckled. "I didn't have such a plan initially." Guanuanyang looked dejected as he said dejectedly, "Then what should I do?" "Direct combat really isn't my forte," Yin Yang said. "It's true that I didn't plan to set up a branch that specializes in assassination, but the residence of 9 Supremes that I envisioned has a dark hall under it. Looking at the entire residence of 9 Supremes, there won't be anyone more suitable than you to be the leader of the Dark Hall." Guanuanyang sprung up in delight. "This is what I like to do the most. From now on, I'm the leader of the Dark Hall. No one is allowed to snatch it from me." The group was stunned again before they guffawed, sweeping away the awkward atmosphere. Whoever snatched it from you would be a fool. The next match was between Lan Ruojuan and Wu Menghuan. Lan Ruojuan was known as the yellow robe of frost sword while Wu Menghuan was known as the purple robe of golden needles. After watching the previous 3 matches, Yun Yang was looking forward to the duo's performance. He wanted to know if they lived up to their nicknames and how amazing they were. Once the battle began, however, everyone was dumbfounded and speechless for a moment. Lan Ruojuan was dressed in his usual yellow robes and had a frost sword as well. It was as if he lived up to his name. However, the moment the battle began, he tossed the frost sword away like a hidden weapon and replaced it with long yellow needles. He even held 2 slightly thicker needles in his hands. His movements were elusive, advancing and retreating in an unpredictable manner. Wu Menghuan, on the other hand, was dressed in a purple robe. He had unleashed a torrential rain of golden needles right from the start, as if he lived up to his name. However, after the rain of needles, he flipped his wrist, and a long sword appeared in his hand. He had become one with the sword, and the level of his swordsmanship was not inferior to Shi Wuchen or Ren Qingquang. Subconsciously, Yun Yang covered his eyes. He could not bear to watch. Between the two of you, who is using a sword and who is using a needle? Wasn't he supposed to live up to his name? He clearly needed to change his clothes to truly match his nickname. Okay, the battle ended with Wu Menghuan winning by a narrow margin. Lan Ruojuan snorted and went to wait for the next battle. The 4 victors so far were Shi Wuchen, Wu Menghuan, Ren Qingquang, and Tai Qingsang. 3 of them were sword cultivators. Just in time, the last 2 members of the group entered the arena. The vicious physician Ping Xiaoyi and the Star Soul swordsman Luo Dajiang. Ping Xiaoyi was skinny and small, looking like a monkey. Luo Dajiang, on the other hand, was tall and broad, almost as tall as Dong Qitian. The moment both of them entered the arena, they stood opposite each other, causing another round of laughter. Dong Qitian grinned. It's like a monkey show in the middle of a busy market. Luo Dajiang was holding a saber in his hand. The saber was slightly taller than Ping Xiaoyi when it was planted on the ground. With a helpless expression, he said, "Xiaoyi, just admit defeat. I really can't muster up the energy to fight with you." Ping Xiaoyi squinted and said, "It's your problem if you can't muster up the energy, but I'm full of energy when I fight with you." Luo Dajiang sighed and drew his saber. The moment the saber rubbed against the scabbard, a dragon's roar and tiger's roar could be heard. The saber was unsheathed, gleaming with a cold gleam. Even Dong Qitian could not help but be moved at this moment. Luo Dajiang stood there innocently, but he gave off a subtle feeling that he was connected to heaven, earth, saber, and man. His entire being was like a towering mountain made entirely of saber, connected to heaven and earth. Endless saber intent spread out from his feet, extending endlessly. The saber descended slowly, pointing forward. An indomitable, domineering aura swept out. For a moment, the sand and dust on the ground flew, covering the entire arena. Faced with such an aura, Ping Xiaoyi subconsciously took a step back. One could not help but feel a sense of indomitable cowardice the moment they came into contact with such a powerful aura. How could Ping Xiaoyi not know this? With a loud cry, he straightened his body, straightening his already scrawny frame. With a casual wave of his hand, a sword quietly appeared in his hand. The blade vibrated slightly, emitting a buzzing sound. Ping Xiaoyi did not draw his sword immediately. He raised his empty left hand, and a gust of greenish-black mist spread out. He chuckled and said, "Dajiang, if I don't seize the opportunity with poison today, I'm afraid we don't even have to fight. However, if I use poison, your chances of winning are slim. It'll be difficult for you to defeat me." Luo Dajiang's eyes were half-lidded as he said faintly, "Really?" He reached into his robe with his right hand and took out a white pill that emitted a rich fragrance. He popped it into his mouth and grinned, saying, "Bring it on." Ping Xiaoyi was stunned when he saw this. He was dumbfounded and speechless. He was stunned again before he jumped up as if someone had hit him on the butt. He shrieked, You. Luo Dajiang. You're shameless, you're despicable, you're a complete and utter hooligan. Luo Dajiang snorted. How am I a hooligan? Ping Xiaoyi jumped up and down in exasperation. You dare say you're not a hooligan? If you're not a hooligan, why did you take the 10,000 dispelling pill when you fought me? Where did you get the 10,000 dispelling pill? From above, a crisp voice said smugly, I gave it to you. What about it? Everyone looked toward the source of the voice and saw Jiang Luoluo standing gracefully on a high spot, her face filled with glee and satisfaction. Ping Xiaoyi was dejected as he murmured, You. Aren't you ganging up to bully me? How can you do this? Luo Dajiang let out a long howl and pressed on with his victory. Isn't anticipating the enemy's moves and using a targeted strategy a must in battle? You can only blame yourself for not being able to find a wife until now. My wife gave it to me, so of course it belongs to my family. Are you coming or not? Come up and fight. Ping Xiaoyi stomped his foot and said, What's there to fight? You've used the all-dispelling pill, so normal poisons won't work on you. Those strange and vicious poisons can't really be used on you either, so what's the point of fighting? Am I just asking for a one-sided beating? The people above were already holding their stomachs and panting with laughter as they watched. The all-dispelling pill, as its name suggested, was said to be able to cure 10,000 types of poisons. It was one of the strange and precious medicines in the bound of universe. Once consumed, one would be immune to all poisons for 3 years. Chapter 995. Luo Dajiang swaggered. Can't you just say it? Are you going to fight or not? I admit defeat. Ping Xiaoyi sheathed his sword in an extremely aggrieved manner and murmured, Just you wait, you too. See if I don't overdose you on the night of your wedding night. Who asked you two to scheme against me? Jiang Luoluo blushed and said, Ping Xiaoyi, I'm not afraid of you. If you dare to poison me, I'll dare to drink it. Your threat has scared me. From now on, as long as you like a girl, I will do my best to destroy you. In the future, I will badmouth you in front of all the sisters-in-law and sisters-in-law and the residents of 9 Supremes and make you a bachelor for the rest of your life. Even if that girl is really blind, I'll pester her to badmouth you every day. We're in the residence of 9 Supremes anyway, I know all your dark history. If I don't do it, I'm not Jiang Luoluo. Do you think I dare or can't do it? Ping Xiaoyi was dumbfounded. He cried out, Spare me, big sister. I was just saying. I'll be frank, I'm taking it seriously anyway. Jiang Luoluo raised her head. Ping Xiaoyi howled miserably, Is there still justice in this world? This. Luo Dajiang, why don't you control your wife? You're bullying me together. Luo Dajiang was unperturbed. We're not married yet. She'll only be my wife after we're married. She's just a confidant now. Why should I control her? Besides, I'll do it just because you asked me to. Who do you think you are? How dare you? Ping Xiaoyi was utterly speechless, utterly disheartened. When you two work together to trick someone, your husband and wife, a couple. But when someone comes to settle the score with you, you're separated and become confidants, each doing his own thing. I've seen something like this. Ping Xiaoyi bowed and begged for mercy, but Jiang Luoluo ignored him. Ping Xiaoyi was drenched in sweat from anxiety, looking flustered and fearful. As the first family member of the residence of 9 Supremes, Jiang Luoluo's influence was not to be underestimated. If she was determined to sabotage Ping Xiaoyi, it would be difficult for him to find a wife, boss. Ping Xiaoyi looked at Yun Yang pleadingly. Help. You can't play like this. This is related to my marriage and the inheritance of my ancestors. Yin Yang held back his laughter and said with a straight face, Ping Xiaoyi, what are your intentions? You actually want me to offend a woman? Haven't you heard that it's better to offend a supreme being than to offend a woman? You actually want to frame me. You really have ulterior motives and are harboring evil intentions. Ping Xiaoyi was at a loss. Then what should we do? What should we do? Hurry up and beg for mercy. You can find a wife when your sister-in-law forgives you. Don't think about it for now. If your reputation is ruined and it gets out, you'll be ruined. Yin Yang's expression was solemn while the rest of the crowd was gloating. Ping Xiaoyi chased after Jiang Luoluo to apologize, but Jiang Luoluo ignored him. Ping Xiaoyi was so anxious that he bowed and groveled. In the end, he made some unknown conditions and Jiang Luoluo seemed to finally relent. When Ping Xiaoyi returned, the first match of the second round of the 9 Supremes ranking had already ended. Shi Wuchen vs Wu Menghuan, a dominating victory. Although Shi Wuchen, Ren Qinghuang, and Wu Menghuan were known for their swordsmanship, there was still a difference in their strengths. Shi Wuchen was a level higher than Wu Menghuan after all, so it was not too surprising that he won. It was short and concise. As the matches went on, it was finally time for the final battle. Shi Wuchen vs Luo Dajiang. To be honest, Yin Yang was not surprised that Shi Wuchen could make it to the end, but he did not expect Luo Dajiang to make it this far as well. The 5 people who won were roughly on par with each other in terms of cultivation base. Among them, Shi Wuchen might be the strongest, but it was only by a hair's breadth. It was not an overwhelming advantage. In every battle, the strategies and tactics used were crucial to victory and defeat. Shi Wuchen's consecutive victories were by no means a fluke. Luo Dajiang, on the other hand, had an unusual tenacity that was more resilient than Shi Wuchen. He grew stronger in the face of strong opponents and never showed weakness. Moreover, he grew braver the more he fought, giving off the feeling that the brave would emerge victorious in a narrow path. As a result, they overcame all obstacles and advanced triumphantly to the final battle. Now, the 2 men stood facing each other. Even Dong Qitian was unprecedentedly cautious, paying full attention to the field. Among the 2 people in the field, one was a king of swords, the other an overlord of sabers. Neither of them was mediocre. The outcome of this battle would surely be earth-shattering and earth-shattering. The reality was as expected. Shi Wuchen was determined to win the position of the residence of 9 Supreme's second Supreme. Luo Dajiang, on the other hand, had emerged as a dark horse, looking as if he was the best candidate for the position. Therefore, the clash of auras between the 2 men had already left the crowd dumbfounded and aghast. Jiang Luoluo, who stood behind Yun Yang, looked nervous. Her pretty eyes watched the field without blinking, her 2 tiny fists clenched tightly as she muttered, "You must win. You must win." Yun Yang was amused and teased her. Shi Wuchen's cultivation base is second to none among the Demiurge Flawed 10. Luo Dajiang most likely won't win. I'm afraid your wish will be dashed, Miss Jiang. Jiang Luoluo glared and pouted. I thought you were a good person. I didn't expect you to be so evil. Shall we make a bet? Yin Yang asked, what bet? What about the stakes? Jiang Luoluo said, if Luo Dajiang wins, you give me a piece of ethereal amethyst. What do you think? What if Shi Wuchen wins? Yin Yang asked. Jiang Luoluo rolled her eyes and said, I'll be your brother's wife as a punishment. You won't lose out on this deal, will you? I've only bet my entire life on a piece of ethereal amethyst. You're the one who's getting the better end of the deal, aren't you? Yin Yang smiled wryly, rubbing his nose. This girl really knew how to make a deal. She had to at least use her bare hands to make a deal, but she did not even use her hands. That won't do. Yin Yang shook his head and said, there's no such way to bet. Jiang Luoluo said, how about this? When your wife comes in the future, I won't say anything bad about you. Otherwise, when she comes, I'll tell her that you always tease your brother's wife, and that I'm one of the victims, just one of the victims. Yin Yang was dumbfounded, completely defeated. Yin Yang finally understood the girl's valiance. He was full of admiration for her, and smiled wryly. All right. As you wish, I'll bet. Chapter 996. Dong Qitian looked askance at Yun Yang and cursed inwardly, "Dumb bird. You can come and chat with this old man if you're bored. Why do you have to provoke women? Don't you know that women are the most unreasonable creatures in this world? They're the only ones." Dong Qitian coughed and said, "I still remember the legend that the former lord of the East Celestial Palace was asked by a friend to give him two choices. One was to reason with his wife, and two was to fight the demon emperor. He was asked to choose either option. He said slowly, reasoning with his wife is just a matter of words, but fighting the demon emperor is a battle of life and death. There's a huge difference in difficulty. But do you know how he chose?" Yun Yang was intrigued. "How?" Dong Qitian said, "The Lord chose to fight the demon emperor without any hesitation. And the last battle was really fought." Yun Yang was sweating profusely. He was sweating like a waterfall. That senior is truly a role model for our generation. At this moment, the hum of a sword and the hum of a saber rang out at the same time. The unity of man and sword. The unity of man and saber. As soon as the two of them made their moves, they both displayed their trump cards at the same time. Shi Wuchen has comprehended sword will and has reached the realm of having nothing else but his sword. Dong Qitian looked at the battlefield and said, "He's not far from the level of comprehending the heart of the sword." "What about Luo Dajiang?" "Luo Dajiang's level is about the same." Dong Qitian said, "His saber will encompasses his entire body and has nothing else but his saber. Although he didn't comprehend much about the heart of the saber and didn't even go that way, he has comprehended something else. That is, there's nothing in this world that can't be used as a saber. It doesn't matter who wins or loses this battle. The only thing that matters is, as long as these two people can continue to walk on this path, and they don't die prematurely, then, the bound of universe will give birth to a true sword emperor and saber emperor once again." As the battle progressed, the two men in the field were gradually getting serious. Shi Wuchen and his sword turned into a murderous autumn wind, accompanied by the autumn rain, frost, and dew. The autumn wind, the autumn rain, and the autumn dew filled the field. At this point in the battle, he had already used the triautumn swordplay 7 or 8 times. The sword intent became more and more bleak, more and more like the chill of autumn. Basically, every time it was used, it would give birth to a completely new understanding. As the 3 autumn sword technique continued to be used, the bright and beautiful spring was gradually dyed into a bleak autumn. Shi Wuchen's state of mind grew colder and colder as he unleashed his sword will, but his sword light grew smoother and smoother. His face was filled with a desolate and excited murderous intent. On the other hand, Luo Dajiang, on the other hand, maintained the strategy of attacking steadily and surely. He was like a towering mountain, unshakable, but he was not just defending without attacking. Once he switched to attacking, he was like a raging wave, indomitable and unyielding. Dong Qitian watched the scene attentively and could not help but sigh softly. "What is it?" Yun Yang asked. Dong Qitian said faintly, "Shi Wuchen has already comprehended the true essence of the sword and is stepping into another stage. However, the stage he's stepping into now is the wrong path, a path that he can only look at but not reach. Even if he manages to step on it, it'll be difficult to turn back and there'll be endless troubles in the future." Yun Yang was speechless. Although Yun Yang's judgment was impressive, his experience was still miles away from Dong Qitian's. That was why he was puzzled by Dong Qitian's comment. In Yun Yang's opinion, Shi Wuchen had already gained the upper hand and was slowly steering the battle to his side. His chances of winning were very high, but why was it a terrible situation in Dong Qitian's eyes? Just based on this battle alone, the outcome is already clear. Shi Wuchen will win without a doubt. Dong Qitian said, because he has comprehended his own heart of the sword in this battle. There's no doubt about it. In spite of this, both sides have embarked on 2 completely different paths in this battle. After this battle, the main thrust of Shi Wuchen's sword intent is to abandon everything in this world and be loyal only to the sword, then to the residence of 9 supremes, and nothing else. Luo Dajiang is different. Other than being loyal to the saber and the residence of 9 supremes, he's also loyal to himself, to his brothers, to his friendship, to his family, and to his ties. Dong Qitian sighed softly. Yin Yang was silent for a moment before he said in a low voice, I kind of understand what you mean. Is it because Shi Wuchen's current sword realm is too extreme that even if he gains a momentary advantage, the consequences will be far-reaching? But Luo Dajiang doesn't have such a worry. Looking at the intense battle between the two men, Dong Qitian said, yes. This difference lies in the difference in the nature of these two men. Is it really that serious? Loyalty to the sword and the residence of 9 supremes, there's nothing else besides that. There doesn't seem to be anything bad about it. Why is it that it's hard to turn back from the past and leave lasting consequences? Yin Yang asked. Whether it's good or bad depends on the person, and the wise man will understand it on his own. Dong Qitian smiled. Some people have selfish motives, some don't. Some live for their ideals, some live for reality. It's just a difference in perspective. There's no difference in superiority or inferiority. Living for ideals usually doesn't lead to a good ending, but living for reality allows one to experience life's various forms and achieve greatness, Dong Qitian said. The reality I'm talking about here isn't selfishness. Do you understand this? I do, Yin Yang answered. Shi Wuchen, as a swordsman, should be loyal to the sword, but he's too obsessed with it. That's biased. Going too far is as bad as not going far enough. In other words, he's successfully entered the world of the sword, but he's immersed in it and can't get out. After a long time, how can it not be hard to turn back from the past and leave endless consequences? A true expert must know when to advance and when to retreat, to be at ease. This is the best state to reach the peak. Dong Qitian said. Yin Yang murmured, he walked into the world of the sword, but he can't get out. He's obsessed with the sword. He felt that he seemed to understand a little, but there were still many things he did not understand. Dong Qitian smiled and said, it's not necessarily a bad thing that you don't understand now. However, if you can comprehend something from this, it'll be the best. Dong Qitian stood with his arms behind his back after he finished speaking, his gaze distant. After a while, he said slowly, back then, there was a custom in my hometown. Whenever someone died in the village, they had to hire someone to play the swona. In our village, there's an old man called Old Uncle Chin. He's especially good at this kind of swona instrument. His first song makes people cry, and the second he plays it, it's heartbreaking. No matter which family holds a funeral, Old Uncle Chin is always invited. As soon as he arrived, the atmosphere, which was originally only 30% sorrowful, became 10% sorrowful under his playing of the swona. The wailing of ghosts and the howling of gods was nothing difficult. As he spoke of the past of his hometown, Dong Qitian's face showed a rare hint of gentleness and nostalgia. His gaze was distant, as if he had returned to the small mountain village of the past, the place that he yearned for day and night. Thousands of years had passed. It had been so long since he had gone back. He turned to ask Yin Yang, have you heard of the swona being played at a funeral? Yin Yang was confused. Of course I have. It's the same custom in the Empire of Yutong. As long as one's family has some wealth, they'll hire someone to play the swona to send them off during the funeral. It's probably the same in the Tianxian continent where I'm from. Dong Qitian nodded in relief. I've heard that the bound of universe and another realm came from the same source. It looks like the fundamental customs and traditions of both realms are the same, even though there's a clear distinction between the cultivators of both realms. Back then, there was a child called Wugang in our village. Both his parents had passed away, and he grew up eating food from other families. Old Father Qin was lonely all his life, still a bachelor in his old age. Seeing that Wugang was pitiful, he took him in. Wugang grew up gradually, but he didn't have any skills when he was in his teens, so he decided to learn how to play the swona from Old Father Qin for a living. Yin Yang was baffled by Dong Qitian's sudden storytelling. Old Father Qin? Wugang? Swona? Funeral? What was this all about? How could these stories have anything to do with the intense battle before them and the obsession with the sword realm? However, old Father Qin was unwilling to let Wugang learn the Suona from him. He kept saying, "Child, it's not that I don't want to teach you, but, once you enter my line of work, it'll be hard for you to turn back. I'm afraid that I'll ruin your life." However, Wugang didn't understand old Father Qin's words at all. Learning this skill didn't just mean that he'd gain a skill, he'd be respected by everyone in the surrounding villages. They'd invite him whenever they needed him, and he'd be treated as a distinguished guest. Why would he ruin my life? I'd have food to eat, drinks to drink, and I could earn money too. How could that not be good? However, old Father Qin refused to teach him. It was not until he grew old and could no longer play the Suona, that Wugang still didn't have a skill. He begged him again and again, saying, "You're getting on in years, you might not be able to play the Suona anymore. I still don't know anything, and when you leave, I can only be a beggar. Are you still unwilling to teach me? Are you going to watch me die of hunger and cold?" It wasn't just Wugang. A few elders in the village also came to persuade him. Old Father Qin sighed and said, "Since that's the case, I'll teach you. However, there's one thing I have to make clear. Don't hate me in the future." Wugang's face was full of joy and he agreed repeatedly. Hence, old Father Qin began to teach Wugang how to play the Suona. Wugang had some talent in the Suona, and he'd been by old Father Qin's side for a long time. He was influenced by what he saw and heard, and his foundation was very good. He quickly got the hang of it, and the rhythm he played was perfect. However, it didn't have that sorrowful and desolate feeling. Hence, every time old Father Qin went to a funeral, he would bring him along so that he could personally experience the sorrowful and desolate feeling of the funeral Suona. Old Father Qin said that when playing the funeral Suona, you definitely couldn't play it in a festive manner. Funerals had to have their own style and rhythm. If you couldn't play it, even if you learned how to play it, no one would invite you. Wugang firmly remembered old Papa Qin's words and wholeheartedly followed old Papa Qin to learn how to play the Suona. After a few years, everyone said that Wugang's Suona playing was becoming more and more like old Papa Qin. Everyone fought to invite him. That year, when old Father Qin passed away, Wugang played the Suona the entire night. From then on, whenever there was a funeral, everyone would invite Wugang to send them off. Wugang would play the Suona in this kind of atmosphere. The more he played, the more desolate it became. The more he played, the sadder his mood became. The more he played, the sadder his mood became. In the end, Wugang didn't find a wife, and he didn't have any children even when he was old. When he was old, he finally understood what old Father Qin meant when he said that it would ruin his life. Funerals were sorrowful, parting, despair, desolation, and misery. The Suona player had to have the same mood to play the Suona. Only then could he truly match the family's mood. Only with this kind of skill would people often invite him. However, if he maintained such a mood for a long time, how could he find a wife and take care of his children? He wouldn't even have that thought anymore. He would only feel that life was boring, filled with sorrow. Therefore, before Wugang died, he buried the Suona that had accompanied him his entire life into the ground. In his later years, there were many young people who wanted to learn from him, promising to take care of him when he was old, but he never accepted a single disciple throughout his entire life. After that, the elders in the village who had heard old Father Qin play the Suona at Wugang's funeral said that ever since old Father Qin and Wugang died, the people in the village no longer felt like they were dead. Dong Qitian finished his story in a desolate tone and said, "Do you understand now? Shi Wuchen's sword has gone into the cold." Yin Yang exhaled softly and said, "I understand now. Everything comes back to its origin, and no matter how it changes, it remains the same. Cultivating the way of the sword is the same as the way of the Suona. If one doesn't put his heart and soul into it, it'll be difficult to learn it well, and achieve nothing. However, once he puts his heart and soul into it, he won't be able to control himself. He can enter but can't exit, and he might be controlled and trapped by his own cultivation, losing himself. That's what you mean, right? Dong Qitian said, that's right. Everything comes back to its origin, and the source is the same. In other words, Shi Wuchen is now on the path of being obsessed with the sword and being controlled by the sword. He's not controlling the sword now, but the sword is controlling him. Is that what you mean? Yin Yang asked. Dong Qitian sighed and said, that's right. Shi Wuchen is now in the upper realm of the sword, where there's nothing else but the sword. He no longer cared about anything in the world, and even himself was no exception. The only fortunate thing is that he hasn't gone too far on this path. There's still affection in his heart, and there's still the residence of 9 Supremes. There's still a chance for him to turn back. Yin Yang turned his head and looked at the ongoing battle. His gaze was fixed on Shi Wuchen, who was gradually gaining the upper hand, and he did not say a word. Dong Qitian continued, if there comes a day when he doesn't even care about these, then he'll truly be a slave to the sword. Once he's devoured by his inner demon, he'll sink into hell with no turning back. Once the cold penetrates his heart, there'll be no turning back. This isn't an exaggeration. When that time comes, any expert can only kill him at most, but it'll be impossible to pull him back. Because he'll only be another Wu Geng. Dong Qitian looked at Yun Yang meaningfully. I've read this story before and suddenly remembered it. Then, I thought of Lu Xiaofeng's friend, Shimen Shui Xue, the peerless swordsman who was merciless after his battle with Yi Gucheng. Chapter 997. A long howl of the sword could be heard, like a dragon's roar in the sky. Everyone could clearly sense the scent of victory from the sword's howl. However, the bleakness of autumn seemed to be even more pronounced. In the arena, Luo Dajiang staggered 7 steps back, his face pale. There was a gash on his left chest that extended all the way to his lower right abdomen. Fortunately, it only tore his clothes and did not really hurt his flesh. It was obvious that Shi Wuchen had shown mercy. The battle was intense but not dangerous. I've lost. Luo Dajiang straightened up, his face full of admiration. Shi Wuchen, your sword has reached the level of heart and sword as one. I accept my defeat wholeheartedly. The second Supreme of the 9 Supremes, Supreme Sword, is well-deserved. I accept my defeat wholeheartedly. A smile appeared on Shi Wuchen's face. You flatter me. I've only touched the threshold, but your current level has surprised me as well, Dajiang. I don't even have much strength left to stand. If the last strike didn't work, it would have been my turn to admit defeat. As he spoke, Shi Wuchen's body swayed, looking like he could barely stand. It was not an act. His head, face, and body were drenched in sweat. It was only after the battle was over that he started sweating. His face was pale, and his eyes were almost out of focus. Be it Shi Wuchen or Luo Dajiang, they had given it their all in this battle. The remaining 8 members of the Demiurge Flawed 10 who were watching from the sidelines looked solemn. It was obvious that no one doubted Shi Wuchen's victory at all. The second Supreme of the residence of 9 Supremes and the title of Supreme Sword were well-deserved. They were well-deserved. Both Shi Wuchen and Luo Dajiang were panting heavily. A puddle of water could be seen under their feet. Yin Yang looked at Shi Wuchen's heartfelt smile despite his exhaustion and said thoughtfully, I don't think it's that serious. Since there are signs, we can't ignore it, Dong Qitian said. Yin Yang smiled faintly and said, we just have to nip it in the bud. None of the brothers of the residence of 9 Supremes would be led astray. With so many brothers by his side, if we still allow him to continue making mistakes after discovering the signs, then it would be our dereliction of duty, our fault, and not his fault. Dong Qitian was stunned when he heard that, remaining silent for a while. Although he did not speak, Yun Yang's words had stirred up a tsunami in his heart. He silently asked himself, is this the so-called brotherhood? Yin Yang announced loudly, now, the first place of the 9 Supremes ranking battle has been decided, and it's Shi Wuchen. From now on, the Triautumn Swordsman, Shi Wuchen, would be the second Supreme of the residence of 9 Supremes, Supreme Sword. Does anyone here have any objections? The Demiurge flawed 10, excluding Shi Wuchen, sighed in unison and said, Shi Wuchen's a lucky bastard to be the second venerable. What can we do? Yi Tuo has finally lived up to his name. Shi Wuchen was furious. Whoever dares to call me Yi Tuo again, I'll punish you according to the sect rules. Yin Yang chuckled and fanned the flames. Brothers, Yi Tuo doesn't seem to be in a good state right now. I'll make it clear here that he'll be the official second brother tomorrow. Be careful, everyone. Tomorrow would be the day. Not today. All 9 of them were quick-witted people. They understood what Yun Yang meant instantly and flew up in unison, charging over like a swarm of bees. Amidst the howling, they instantly pinned Shi Wuchen to the bottom. Shi Wuchen was already exhausted after going through a huge battle. How could he resist such a group of ferocious fellows? He could only endure and allow himself to be at the mercy of others. With a cry, he was pinned to the bottom. At that moment, he felt as if he had been squashed out of his body. Even his voice had changed. I'm going to punish all of you with the sect rules. Ow. Help! He turned his head with difficulty to seek help from the bottom, only to see Yun Yang leaping up excitedly to the top and sitting down. Ow. Yay! Shi Wuchen rolled his eyes miserably. It was as if the last breath in his chest and abdomen had been squeezed out as well. Other than one of his legs twitching outside, he could no longer move the rest of his body. Ha ha ha, the 10 of them guffawed in unison. Yi Tuo will definitely seek revenge now that he's the second brother. Who's afraid of him? We have a boss. You're right. Sai, Yi Tuo is the second brother. This Yi Tuo is the second brother Yi Tuo, this, ha ha ha. F*ck, Ping Xiaoyi, you're really a talent. What eloquence and thought. The battle to determine the position of Supreme in the residence of 9 Supremes had finally come to an end. The residence of 9 Supremes leader, Supreme Cloud, Yun Yang. Second Supreme Sword, Shi Wuchen. Third Supreme Saber, Luo Dajiang. Fourth Supreme War, Tai Qingsong. Fifth Supreme Madness, Ren Qinghuang. Sixth Supreme Dream, Wu Menghuan. Seventh Supreme Lan Ruojuan. Eighth Supreme Shi Bujia. Ninth Supreme Moon, Kong Luoyue. Supreme Lord Deific Remnant, Guanuanyang. Supreme Lord Earthly K, Ping Xiaoyi. Chief Major Domo, Qian Duo. Chief Instructor, Dong Qitian. At this point, the residence of 9 Supremes' high-level forces were completed. The 9 Supremes took their respective positions while the 2 Supreme Lords under the position of Supreme performed their respective duties. Supreme Sword, Supreme Saber, Supreme War, Supreme Stone, and Supreme Madness belonged to the combat department. When the sect was in a battle, these Supreme Lord subordinates would take the lead in every battle. Supreme Lan was in charge of gathering intelligence, Supreme Dream was in charge of judging rewards and punishments, while Supreme Moon was in charge of managing the sect and communicating with the Major Domo. As for Tian Can and Earthly K, they were in charge of the sect's affairs that could not be dealt with openly. Once Tian Can and Earthly K made a move, there would be Tian Can and Earthly K. Among the Demiurge flawed 10 taking the position of Supreme, Shi Bujia was probably the one who suffered the most. His ability was on par with Tai Qingsong and was not inferior to Luo Dajiang, but after the battle with Tai Qingsong, he had gone too far and was not strong enough, allowing Lan Ruojuan to take advantage of the situation. As for Shi Bujia, he was naturally a little unhappy. However, he let go of the matter after a few jokes. Just like what Yun Yang had said before the battle, luck played a part in the arrangement of battles and luck was an important part of a cultivator's overall ability. Furthermore, there would be no harm if there was no comparison. Although he was only one of the 8 Supremes, he was still one of the 9 Supremes. There was still Kong Luoyue, Guanuanyang, and Ping Xiaoyi below him. Looking at Guanuanyang and Ping Xiaoyi who were not selected for the 9 Supremes, they did not take it to heart at all. They looked cheerful and content, What else did he have to regret? Dong Qitian could only scoff at Yun Yang's assignment. It was too general, too perfunctory, too broad, it was child's play. He had never seen anyone manage a sect like this. Chapter 998. Although Dong Qitian had grown to like the atmosphere of the residence of Nine Supremes as time went by, and Yun Yang had taken the initiative to terminate the contract early, Dong Qitian might not have been willing to leave the residence of Nine Supremes. The affairs of the world were like a game of chess, unpredictable and unfathomable. However, Yun Yang had directly and forcefully decided on his position as the chief instructor. Dong Qitian was still displeased. How can I be ranked below all of you? Dong Qitian felt the need to argue with Yun Yang. I'm leaving. I'll leave once I'm done. However, he did not manage to say it out loud. Host of the Nine Peaks. Yun Yang ordered and continued, after the host of the Nine Peaks, you must place your hand on the platform in the center and channel your spiritual and deific consciousness into it until the platform glows. Shi Wuchen and the others quickly arrived at their respective peaks and entered the main hall of the main peak. Their faces were filled with incredulity when they saw what they saw. Logically speaking, since the residence of Nine Supremes was established, no one had ever come to the main halls of the respective peaks. Even if they were not covered in dust, they should not be as spotless as they were now. However, when they looked around, it was clean and tidy, as bright as new. Upon closer inspection, he realized that it really was spotless, clean to the extreme. What was going on? Even if they had cleaned the place thoroughly, it was inevitable that some traces of cleaning would be left behind. How could it be so flawless? In each of the main halls, there was a strangely shaped purple crystal platform in the center, emitting a purple radiance. On the high platform, there was a flat plate with a handprint on it. It was obviously the place where Yun Yang had placed his palm on it. The 8 of them placed their hands on it suspiciously, trying their best to channel their deific consciousness and spiritual energy into the imprint like a river flowing backward. They were still thinking, what's this thing used for? The moment they channeled their energy into it, everyone was shocked. When their spiritual energy and deific consciousness had been channeled to a certain extent, everyone could clearly feel that their deific consciousness seemed to have formed some sort of connection with the platform in front of them. It was as if there was an invisible line connecting him to the platform. This feeling was undoubtedly strange, but it was not fake at all. Just as this feeling appeared, the amethyst platform in front of him suddenly emitted a purple light. It became brighter and brighter, gradually sweeping out. Slowly, the entire mountain was enveloped in a layer of purple mist. After a while, the boundless purple gas drilled into the bodies of the 8 people. In an instant, it disappeared without a trace. The 8 of them opened their eyes in shock, only to discover that there was nothing in front of them. Where was the amethyst table? There was nothing in front of him except the smooth, mirror-like ground. That's strange. Is it magic? Everyone felt their scalps go numb. At this moment, all 8 of them heard Yun Yang's voice at the same time. Did all of you hear that? The 8 of them subconsciously jumped up at the same time. Boss. Where was Boss? How? There's no need to look around, and there's no need to make a fuss. Yun Yang's voice continued to ring in their minds, communicating directly with their primordial spirits. This is the biggest secret of our residence of Nine Supremes. Only the Nine Supremes are qualified to know and enjoy it. No matter where you are, as long as you're still breathing, you can use this secret to communicate with each other. Yun Yang's voice rang indifferently. This is the top secret of the residence of Nine Supremes. No one is allowed to know about it. At this point, Yun Yang's voice stopped ringing. However, these few words had stirred up a storm in the hearts of Shi Wuchen and the others, and they could not calm down for a long time. The residents of Nine Supremes actually had such an almost nature-defying ability. They could communicate with each other at any time, anywhere, to exchange information, and to exchange what they needed. This was too domineering. One had to know that the most difficult thing to do in the martial world today was none other than the problem of communication. Unless it was a high-class celestial luck banner or above, only the palace-level high-ranking officials were qualified to use the communication jade to exchange information. Those who could use it freely were at least at the level of the East Celestial Palace. As for those below, they might not even be able to afford the cost of a communication jade. In fact, they did not even have the cultivation base to use the communication jade. However, the residents of 9 Supremes, a sect that did not even have a lower-class celestial luck banner, could solve this insurmountable problem so easily and effortlessly. This was not just nature-defying, it was simply. There was no way to describe it. In short, it was too freakish, too demonic, too inhuman. Even if they were separated by thousands of mountains and rivers, they could communicate whenever they wanted to. They did not even need to use any spiritual energy, and they could chat whenever they wanted to. What a pleasant surprise it was. However, there were even more pleasant surprises that came one after another, each higher than the last, crashing into the newly promoted 9 Supremes. Before they could calm down from their excitement, everyone was surprised to find that their cultivation seemed to have increased, and it had increased by a large margin. Starting from Shi Wuchen, everyone's cultivation base had basically just broken through to Saint Level 3, but now, they had all skyrocketed to the pinnacle of Saint Level 3. The speed of advancement was not only stupefying, but also baffling. Since the beginning of time, there had never been such a rare, strange, and inexplicable event. Once one's cultivation base had reached a certain level, one would need to spend a few times more effort and time to advance further in the future. This was especially so for people like Shi Wuchen and the others who had reached Saint Level at such a young age. If they wanted to advance further in the future, which one of them did not have to rely on the accumulation of years and endless hard work? 3 to 5 years was already a godly speed. Those below 10 years were geniuses. It was normal for those who had 30 years of accumulation to break through in one day. Who would have thought that the residents of 9 Supremes only needed an hour? Although everyone knew that the sudden increase in their cultivation base was due to the fact that they had just ascended to the position of 9 Supremes and the resonance of their deific consciousness and soul with the mystical amethyst platform, it was a benefit that they had obtained with the help of the boundless amethyst chi. However, the benefit was still a little too shocking. Shi Wuchen tried coughing, imitating the method Yun Yang had taught him. Cough, cough. What followed was a series of dissatisfaction. Itua, are you crazy? What are you coughing for? Yes, why are you coughing? You scared your father. Shut up if there's nothing else. May I ask what orders the newly promoted second brother has for me? There was actually someone who was sensible. It was Kong Luoyue's voice. Bootlicker. 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 Kong Luoyue, you shameless bastard. Why didn't your father realize that you're actually this kind of trash? That's right, that's right. You're just a piece of trash who fawns over my smelly feet. Your father is ashamed to be associated with you. Shi Wuchen snorted and said, what are you being so noisy about? I'm talking about serious matters now, not making a fool of myself. You've all heard what boss said just now. I don't want this secret to be known by anyone other than the 9 of us. This is the most realistic issue, and we must strictly abide by it. Chapter 999. The remaining 7 people immediately fell silent. Shi Wuchen said, Boss was embarrassed to make it clear just now. Can't you guys hear it? Keeping it a secret may be hurtful to the other 2 brothers, but if it gets out, it might be even more hurtful. Can't you guys figure this out? The group sighed in unison after a moment of silence. Shi Wuchen was right. His words were crude, but his logic was not. If this were to get out now, it would be extremely hurtful to both Ping Xiaoyi and Guanuanyang. Everyone had this right except for the 2 of them. We can think about how to compensate Xiaoyi and Nuanyang in other aspects. At least, let them catch up to them in terms of cultivation base. At times like this, we have to think more for our brothers. Put yourself in their shoes instead of talking about martial world loyalty blindly. That's not how loyalty works. Shi Wuchen snorted and said in a low voice. The 7 of them were immediately convinced and said in unison, "Second brother is right." Shi Wuchen nodded and said nothing more. Suddenly, Yin Yang's voice rang in his ears. "Wuchen." Shi Wuchen hummed in acknowledgement and sensed carefully. "I'm talking to you alone now. The others can't hear me." Yin Yang said, "Don't make a sound. Don't leak the secret." Shi Wuchen nodded, feeling even more surprised. It turned out that the exchange of information could be presented in a more private manner. "My knowledge and understanding of the Demiurge Flawed 10 is rather limited. Most of it comes from your introduction." Yin Yang said, "Therefore, you'll have to keep an eye on our brother's emotions, moods, friendship, and daily interactions from now on. I hope to be brothers with all of you for life. It's definitely not a short-term collaboration." Yin Yang said, "Wuchen, your task is rather arduous. It's a long way to go." Shi Wuchen felt a great sense of responsibility pressing down on his heart and body. For a moment, his heart felt heavy. He said, "Don't worry, boss. As long as I, Shi Wuchen, am here, I guarantee that we brothers will never fall apart." "Then I'm relieved." Yin Yang reminded him, "Think of your brothers more if you encounter anything in the future, especially everyone's feelings. You don't just have a sword, you have us too. Don't forget, I understand." "How could I forget?" Shi Wuchen answered seriously. Yin Yang did not speak anymore, the hidden stillness in his heart finally relaxing a little. According to Dong Qitian, Shi Wuchen had only just stepped onto the wrong path. There was still a long way to go before he reached the so-called path of no return for the Sword Devil, where he had nothing else but his sword. If he continued down this path, there would be a day when he would step onto the path of a single man. However, if from now on, he was to be more responsible for the Brotherhood and experience more of the Brotherhood, how could he be a lone man? At that time, even if he wanted to abandon his sword and have nothing else, it would be very difficult to do so. Anyway, you, Shi Wuchen, are the second supreme, the second most important person in the residence of 9 supremes. If you don't take responsibility for such an important matter, who will? As long as this layer of shackles hung in his heart, even if Shi Wuchen wanted to be merciless, his future path would not be cut off. Dong Qitian, who was still in the residence of 9 supremes, could clearly feel the subtle change in the spiritual qi. The originally abnormally rich spiritual qi atmosphere suddenly doubled again. There were even wisps of purple qi swirling in the air within the residence of 9 supremes now. Although the purple qi was weak and almost undetectable, the majestic qi of Tao was real, and it entered the eyes of an expert like Dong Qitian. Delighted, Dong Qitian mobilized his deific consciousness, intending to observe and identify it carefully. However, the faint purple qi only flowed for a moment before it dispersed and could no longer be found. However, Dong Qitian discovered another shocking fact: the purple qi had a fixed amount. The number of people in the residence of 9 supremes now corresponded to the amount of purple qi. Each faint wisp of purple qi found a person's body precisely and quietly melted into it. Countless disciples of the residence of 9 supremes felt nothing. At most, they felt a little more invigorated, but they did not understand what was going on. However, all the high-level cultivators seemed to have been enlightened, and they were inexplicably shocked. What was going on? Among them, Dong Qitian's feeling was the most obvious. At that moment, he acutely felt that all the muscles, bones, and meridians in his body had relaxed considerably. The impurities that had accumulated in his meridians for so many years rippled slightly as the faint purple qi entered his body. His own cultivation also advanced a little because of the purple qi entering his body. With Dong Qitian's actual cultivation base, this small step was almost equivalent to 10 years of hard work by the Demiurge Flawed 10 and the others. It was not an easy feat, it's a newly established sect that doesn't have the celestial luck banner to increase its providence. How could it have the qi of Tao? Dong Qitian was so shocked that he almost fell to the ground. This aura. It has to be at least a palace sect. No, even a palace sect doesn't have it. His deific consciousness spread out instantly, engulfing the entire residence of 9 supremes, intending to confirm the situation. With a single glance, he was astonished once more. Under his deific consciousness, he could clearly sense that the wisps of qi of Tao were gradually seeping into the bodies of every child in the residence of 9 Supremes. These children, on the other hand, had a seed of Tao planted in their bodies from now on. Whether they could sprout and take root in the future depended on the individual's luck, but the seed was already there. This alone was enough to put them at the forefront of all the disciples in the world. How could the seed of Tao be obtained so easily? Those who were fated with it had to go through countless hardships and hundreds and thousands of years of cultivation, going against the natural order, in order to seize a tiny bit of it from heaven's Tao and grow stronger. Only then could they talk about becoming a pinnacle powerhouse. Perhaps, it could be said that even if you had the seed of Tao, you might not necessarily become an unparalleled powerhouse. However, if you did not have the seed of Tao, you would never become a pinnacle powerhouse. It was that absolute. However, the disciples of the residence of 9 Supremes had obtained it so easily. While Dong Qitian was still in shock, the qi of Tao swiftly integrated and disappeared, and he could no longer feel it. In spite of this, the waves of shock in Dong Qitian's heart grew more and more uncontrollable. He could not help asking himself. I've been imprisoned for 4,000 years, only to witness the birth of such a sect when I'm released. Is this God's will or man's will? Is it hardship? Or is it fate? Since the beginning of time, when has such a sect ever appeared? Thousands of disciples with the seed of Tao. What a heaven-defying sect this is. Is it a stroke of luck that I'm able to stand in such a sect, or is it fate? Chapter 1000. On the other side. Heaven's sword and earth's saber had not stepped out of the house for many days, focusing on recuperating their bodies. After all, this was Yun Yang's residence of 9 Supremes, and they were not his people. If they knew too much, they would feel awkward and uncomfortable. In spite of this, during the period of recuperation in the residence of 9 Supremes, Li Yisan's frail body that was on the brink of death had actually stabilized successfully. Most of this was due to Song Changgong's windless day and night infusion of energy regardless of the cost, but the geographical advantage of the residence of 9 Supremes was also crucial. Li Yisan's current condition was showing signs of improvement, and this was definitely not the result of Song Changgong's infusion of energy. Although it was only a sign, it was still a good sign. Both elders were delighted. No matter how open-minded Li Yisan sounded, no one was willing to die if they could live. Today, on the day that the 9 Supremes had returned, both of them unexpectedly felt the presence of the force of Tao. It had even burrowed into their bodies uncontrollably. Li Yisan's withered body suddenly trembled and the qi of Tao entered it. He opened his eyes at once and asked, "Big brother, do you feel it?" It had been a long time since his eyes glowed. When he opened them now, there was a glimmer of light. Although it was just a flash, it was truly a flash of divine light. Li Yisan heaved a soft sigh of relief and said in a low voice, "Big brother, with today's opportunity, you don't need to inject mystical qi into me for at least half a year." Song Changgong was even more shocked as he cried out involuntarily, What's going on?" Li Yisan smiled faintly and said peacefully, "Big brother, it's already a great fortune that we could be here at the right time and enjoy the occasion. There's no need to pursue the other reasons. It's better not to know." He said slowly, "If the Commerce League asks about this in the future, are you going to tell us or not?" Song Changgong laughed. "You're right, brother. It's better not to know." He then closed his eyes and focused on recuperating and cultivating, completely dismissing the thought of going out. As the leader of the residence of 9 Supremes, Yun Yang was keenly aware that the 9 peaks were connected, the earth veins were converging, and the mountain guarding formation was undergoing further changes. As the density of the spiritual qi grew denser, the shadow of the celestial luck banner was summoned from his body. Yun Yang wrote the residence of 9 Supremes on the illusory shadow seriously. Then, it was Supreme Lord Yun Yang, the 8 Supreme Lords of the 8 Peaks, Shi Wuchen, Luo Dajiang. He planned to participate in the Celestial Luck Banner contest 5 months and 27 days later. Finally, he filled in the address and the place he belonged to. How old is the oldest of the disciples who were sent out? About 14 or 15. Although they are all extremely talented, they're still lacking compared to yours. Huh. Fatty, this is the central peak. Yin Yang looked at little Fatty like he was looking at a retard. Do you know? Of course I do. This is the central peak. Fatty looked puzzled, unable to comprehend the situation. The disciples of the central peak must have a senior brother of the sect in the future. Don't tell me you don't know this. Yin Yang had the urge to suck the fat fellow's oil out and light him up as a sky lantern. Of course there is, of course. How can I not know? Little Fatty nodded, looking confused. He did not know what Yin Yang meant. But the disciples you picked for me are clearly younger than the other disciples, okay? How do you expect me to choose the eldest senior brother of the residents of 9 Supremes? Yin Yang rubbed his temples and suddenly exploded. Can't you grow some brains? Grow some brains? Sigh. I've forgotten about that. Little Fatty was speechless. The fact that they are younger is secondary. This is not an urgent time, so there's still room for negotiation. But now, do you know when it is? The Battle of the Celestial Luck Banner is just around the corner. There's less than half a year's time at most, and the disciples of the Central Peak have to fight in the battle. Otherwise, how can they serve as an example? Yin Yang glared at Fatty as if he wanted to devour him. You want me to bring this group of little turnips to fight when the battle starts half a year later? Master Jin Yong has passed away. Chapter 1001. Little Fatty was at a complete loss. His eyes darted around, finally realizing that he seemed to have gotten himself into big trouble. Should I ask them for a few older ones? They're all disciples, it doesn't matter if I change them. Do you think this is child's play? Yin Yang's spittle kept little Fatty from opening his eyes. I'm the leader of the sect, the supreme in charge, and I'm going to find someone else to change them when I feel that my disciples aren't good enough? Where's my face? If you're shameless, I'm shameless too. How am I going to manage the sect in the future? Little Fatty's eyes were wide open in confusion. What do we do then? We have to solve it no matter what. What do we do? Nothing. Yin Yang rolled his eyes exasperatedly, thinking that he had been tricked badly by this Fatty this time. Little Fatty had kept a batch of disciples with the best aptitude for himself. Of course, it was out of good intentions, but doing so would only serve as a source of gossip. These disciples were younger than the other disciples, so it would be difficult for them to be of use in the short term. That was the real problem. When the sect was gathering, others would bring their disciples in large groups while he, the leader of the sect, would bring a group of children. When others' disciples could be put to use, his own disciples could only watch from the sidelines. What a freaking situation it was. This situation would not improve for at least 3 to 5 years. After all, the oldest among his first batch of 19 disciples was only 9 years old. They were all textbook versions of Shota Lolas. Sigh. Yin Yang sighed from the bottom of his heart. Other than sighing, he really did not know what else to say. Unexpectedly, Dong Qitian's dissatisfied voice rang in his ears. What are you sighing for, child? If you're not satisfied with them and are unwilling to take them as disciples, you can transfer them all to me. This old man doesn't mind their aptitude, or their age. Dong Qitian had wanted to say that they were not gifted, but his conscience prevented him from lying through his teeth. In the end, he attributed the problem to their age. Yin Yang almost spat blood. Boss, are you saying that they're not old enough? Although it's indeed an issue of their age, the real problem that needs to be solved isn't here. Dong Qitian snorted, his tone full of disdain. The 19 children's excitement was long gone, leaving only anxiety. Why did their leader go back in after coming out? Why doesn't he look happy? Could it be that you're not satisfied with us? But it was clearly the chief manager who jumped out one by one. Even if one or two of us weren't good, could it be that all of us weren't good enough to enter the head venerate's eyes? Just as the little ones were feeling uneasy, they saw their sect leader Shurzuan slowly walk out from inside. He was handsome and dignified, with the bearing of a monarch looking down on the world. The little ones couldn't help but feel respect for him, and their awe was even stronger than before. From now on, all of you are the nominal disciples of the central peak, Yunyang said faintly. I will teach you the cultivation method in unison, treating all of you equally. The children listened attentively, staring at Yunyang without blinking. After that, there will be a small competition every 10 days. Following the 9 Supremes' order, I will rank the 19 of you. 2 months later, the top 10 will become this lord's inner disciples. The rules outside of the contest are even simpler. Yunyang smiled. I won't urge you to cultivate intentionally. All the progress of cultivation depends on your own will. Yunyang made it sound simple. In spite of this, the children's expressions grew more and more serious, becoming unprecedentedly serious. Everyone understood the sect leader Shurzuan's meaning clearly. In the residence of 9 Supremes, only the strong would be respected. What was the point of nurturing the weak? Although the sect leader Shurzuan did not say what would happen to the other disciples other than the inner disciples who had been chosen, their subsequent cultivation would definitely not be good. However, the key to this outcome was their own hard work. Without further ado, Yunyang began to impart the cultivation method to the little ones. According to the Bound of Universe's rules, such basic cultivation methods were basically the same. When there was a need to choose a cultivation method that suited each individual's characteristics, it had to be above the level of heaven mystic. At the very least, it would only be meaningful to nurture the disciples who had reached that level. Not only was it not suitable to impart advanced cultivation methods to the new disciples, it was also easy for the school's unique cultivation method to be leaked. The weaker one's cultivation base was, the easier it was for accidents to happen. Whether it was being robbed by outsiders, eliminated by the school, or a lack of progress in cultivation, it was all possible for the school's cultivation method to be leaked. Therefore, the more advanced cultivation methods would only be imparted to the disciples after they had reached a certain level. However, the situation with the residents of 9 Supremes and Yunyang was different. Although he was also imparting basic cultivation methods, Yunyang observed each child carefully for a moment before he picked out several cultivation methods and distributed them to the 19 children. Yunyang had given a total of 7 cultivation methods to the 19 children. The cultivation methods that the boys and girls cultivated were especially different. Teaching in accordance with the students' aptitude from this stage. Dong Qitian watched Yunyang's actions from the side. His heart skipped a beat as he was inexplicably shocked. Teaching in accordance with the students' aptitude was easy to say, but it was extraordinarily difficult to actually do it. Everyone's foundation, meridians, talent, aptitude, personality, and temper were all different. It was easier said than done to accurately grasp them. However, Yunyang had done it the first time he met these children. It was a grand gesture and an astonishing boldness. I'd like to see if your teaching in accordance with the student's aptitude is a random arrangement or if it's really true. Then, Yunyang spent the entire day teaching the basic cultivation method as well as a set of movement skills, a set of footwork, a set of palm skills, a set of fist skills, a set of sword skills, and a set of saber skills to the children. Of course, other than the movement skills and footwork that were taught uniformly, the palm, fist, sword, and saber forms were taught in accordance with the student's aptitude. Each had its own emphasis. After a day and a night like this, when he looked at these children again, he was surprised to see that every one of them had practiced to a decent level. Although it was just a stance, there was no substance to it. The result was enough to make Dong Qitian and Qian Duo click their tongues in wonder. In cultivation, every set of movement, sword, and fist forms had its own requirements. Each move and style had to have at least a certain degree of precision. They were all things that had been passed down through thousands of years of practice, so there was almost no room for change. If one's wrist was raised or lowered by an inch, the distance between one's feet was wider or narrower when one took a step, if one's shoulders were a little higher or a little lower, if one's gaze was a little off, all of these would result in the difficult mastery of this technique. The slightest difference could lead to 1,000 miles of difference. This was the most suitable example here. Therefore, martial arts cultivation required talent first and foremost, a talent that not everyone possessed. Imitation, memory, and physical agility and coordination were the basic requirements. However, to be able to completely memorize the cultivation technique in a single night and even memorize a set of movement technique, a set of footwork technique, a set of palm technique, a set of sword technique, and a set of saber technique at the same time like these little fellows, they were undoubtedly rare peerless geniuses. Even for those top-notch celestial luck banner disciples, there were only a handful of geniuses who had photographic memory. In spite of this, it was only Yun Yang's first time teaching disciples, but the 19 children he had taught had all done it without exception. Chapter 1002. Young Yun, how did you do it? I don't believe that these children are all geniuses who have photographic memory and can remember everything they hear. Dong Qitian's eyes were about to pop out of their sockets. It's really not my credit. At most, I've imparted the cultivation methods and techniques as meticulously as possible. As for how these children can improve so quickly, it's mainly because their previous experiences were too painful and I've given them too much pressure just now. Everyone has focused their full attention on absorbing and imparting, so there's no reason for them not to remember. What Yun Yang said seemed reasonable, but he was not telling the truth. The real reason for this miracle was Emmy. Yun Yang had asked Emmy to examine each person's potential and choose the most suitable foundational cultivation method. He then taught them saber, sword, and fist skills according to each person's unique traits. This itself was already twice the result with half the effort, not to mention that Emmy had secretly released its mental energy during the teaching process to help the children memorize, allowing them to draw inferences from one instance. However, this was Yun Yang's biggest secret, so it was not convenient to tell Dong Qitian. Actually, you could have recorded it in jade slips. Wouldn't it save more time and effort to write it directly into the brain through jade slips? Dong Qitian asked. Saving time and effort often means that the effect can't be maximized. If you really do that, it'll definitely cause a weak foundation and a lack of knowledge. Yin Yang said, if that's the case, there's already an innate difference before we've even reached the level of competition. I want to give them the feeling that every step they take forward requires them to exert all their strength to complete it, only then can they achieve something. This way, this group of brats will work even harder and never look back. The method of storing jade slips in one's deific consciousness with one's own deific consciousness isn't suitable now. The most suitable method now is to let them use their own efforts to obtain that opportunity, Yun Yang said. There's no such thing as reaping without sowing in the residence of 9 supremes, nor will there be any special care. What they want, they must obtain it through their own efforts. Those who don't work hard or don't work hard enough will only fall to the state of being eliminated. Dong Qitian did not speak. Yun Yang's method was harsh and extreme, but the disciples who were taught using this method only had one goal in their eyes in the future, to be number one. Furthermore, everyone was fighting for first place. In front of them, behind them, and beside them, there would always be a group of equally arrogant companions who were unwilling to fall behind. In such a competitive atmosphere, it was not an easy thing to not improve. Aren't you worried that they'll kill each other? Dong Qitian asked suddenly, his question hitting the nail on the head. I'm not worried. If this went on, it was inevitable that disciples who killed each other would appear. When that time comes, we can just kill the chicken to warn the monkey. Yin Yang said indifferently, raising the rules and restrictions now is far less effective than punishing them at that time. Dong Qitian was silent for a long time. After a long time, Dong Qitian sighed softly. I'd really like to see how the disciples you've taught and the sects you've developed with this method of yours would look like 10 or 100 years later. Would it be brilliant or withered? Yin Yang smiled. I want to know too. The 19 children had already entered the training room to cultivate. Each of them was cultivating diligently in the most arduous state. Some were meditating, some were deep in thought with a frown, and some were diligently practicing their movement, footwork, and swordsmanship. The only thing that was consistent was that each of them was giving it their all without holding back. This was something that anyone could see. In less than an hour's time, the floor of the training room was already stained with sweat, and gradually, the sweat dripped down in large patches. Yin Yang watched for a while longer and turned to leave without a word of comment. His action exerted more pressure on the children. Qian Duo asked from the side, "Isn't this a little too much? What if there's someone who can't handle the pressure?" Yin Yang turned to look at him strangely. "They'll be eliminated if they can't do it. What's the point of coming if they can't even handle this pressure? I'm taking in disciples, I won't be babysitters." Qian Duo's chubby face trembled. "It's too cruel. I'm really glad that I'm not your disciple." Yin Yang snorted and looked at him from the corner of his eyes. Majordomo Qian. When the day the residence of 9 Supremes soars into the clouds and dominates the bound of universe, when the 9 Supremes' cultivation base reaches the level of transcendence and sainthood, if the Majordomo's cultivation base is still far from being able to keep up, little Fatty paled. "Big brother, let's not fool around." "Fool around? Do you think I'm joking with you? When that time comes, even if I don't dismiss you, do you think you can still do this job? If even your grand disciple's cultivation base surpasses yours, what face do you have to be the Majordomo of the residence of 9 Supremes then?" Yin Yang glanced at him from the corner of his eyes and said nothing more. However, his words had already made little Fatty think about it seriously, his expression turning anxious. "That's right. If it really comes to that, what face do I have to occupy the position of Majordomo? No, I have to seize the time to cultivate as well. Even if I can't rise to the top of this world, at least I can't be too far behind." But even with such a high-pressure training, the residence of 9 Supremes is destined to be unable to make it in time for the Celestial Luck Banner contest half a year later. "Do you have other plans?" Dong Qitian asked. "Why not? I've chosen to officially open the residence now to make it in time for this round of the banner contest and obtain the Celestial Luck Banner." Yin Yang sighed softly as he watched the spiritual chi whirlpool in the residence of 9 Supremes getting thicker. "A month later, I'll need Elder Dong to refine the cultivation base enhancing medicinal pill again." "All right." Dong Qitian's eyes were filled with interest as he agreed readily. Yin Yang had, of course, won the bet between him and Jiang Luoluo. Jiang Luoluo actually came to congratulate him after the incident. "Congratulations, big brother, for winning the bet with me." The corners of Yin Yang's lips twitched as he flashed an amiable smile. Winning or losing is just a game, but as the first family member of the residence of 9 Supremes, Big Brother naturally has a welcome gift. Jiang Luoluo was elated. "I want the ethereal amethyst." Yin Yang was speechless. "I was going to give you the ethereal amethyst as a welcome gift. If you win, you take it away. If you lose, I'll give it to you." "What's going on?" Luo Dajiang, who was standing aside, did not speak. As Yin Yang gave the ethereal amethyst away, he could not help sighing. "Dajiang, although you're honest and kind, you'll never suffer a loss in this life with a wife like this." Luo Dajiang stuttered, "Boss, this is all fate." Chapter 1003. Almost at the same time, many sects with celestial luck banners had received news and even specific information from the challengers. These could be hidden before the battle, but from the moment the challenge was submitted, there was no longer any secret to speak of. Sects with mediocre class and above celestial luck banners were strong and did not receive many challenges, but those with lower class celestial luck banners faced an overwhelming number of enemies. It was especially so for the 3 sects with lower-class celestial luck banners that were ranked at the bottom. They were almost in a state of panic at the slightest movement. Kangwu Union, which ranked last, looked like it was facing a formidable enemy. Looking at the long list of challengers, its leader was so worried that his hair had turned white. Why are there so many challenge letters? There are actually more than 100 clans that want to challenge us. And among these 100 clans, who will win in the end? Who will get the final qualification? There are records of these sects before us, so we have a rough understanding of their strength. But what is this residence of 9 Supremes? What is its background? When was it established? Why is there no record of it? Check. As the news of all the challenges spread throughout the world, countless sects began to respond. Some prepared, some went out to battle, and some went out to fight. Those with celestial luck banners naturally did not move for the time being, actively preparing for the battle and guarding against an unexpected attack. Those without celestial luck banners, on the other hand, were looking for opponents because those who wanted to challenge a target sect with a celestial luck banner needed to defeat 10 other sects to qualify for the challenge. For this reason, the residence of 9 Supremes, which had been established for the shortest time and seemed to have no foundation, naturally became the weakest target and the best stepping stone to qualify for the challenge. Get rid of this residence of 9 Supremes first. The higher-ups of more than 20 sects made the same decision one after another. Getting rid of the residence of 9 Supremes first could not only increase their qualifications and eliminate an opponent, but they could also train their soldiers and let other sects of similar strength fight first to deplete their strength. It was a good opponent that could kill many birds with one stone. How could they miss this opportunity? Let's go. Who is the hero in all the mountains and rivers? The martial world reigns supreme, the world is king. The celestial luck is in heaven, who can get it? For a time, the countless sects and rivers under the jurisdiction of the Sacred Heart Palace started to boil like a pot of boiling oil. 500 miles away from the Sacred Heart Palace, in front of Mount Fivefold, there was an even more spectacular scene. Mount Fivefold was a unique and famous mountain around the Sacred Heart Palace. The entire mountain was shaped like a pagoda. Apart from the fact that the mountain was unusually huge, there were strict restrictions on each mountain. It was the battlefield of the Celestial Luck Banner battle for hundreds of thousands of years. The first mountain realm of this mountain was only limited to the competition for the Celestial Luck Banner. Those who could go to the second mountain realm were qualified to compete for lower-class Celestial Luck Banners. As for the higher third and fourth mountain realms, they were the battlegrounds for the middle-class and upper-class Celestial Luck Banners, while the fifth mountain realm was the place where the higher-ups of the Sacred Heart Palace ruled, rarely visited by outsiders. When the Sacred Heart Palace officially spread the news of the start of the Celestial Luck Banner battle, it was equivalent to ordering all sects with Celestial Luck Banners to stop all external expeditions. Anyone who wanted to participate in the Celestial Luck Banner battle must travel day and night and arrive at their destination. All the sects with Celestial Luck Banners had to completely close their doors during this period of time, and no disciple was allowed to go out. This restriction was, of course, to prevent sects with Celestial Luck Banners from suppressing or even annihilating their target opponents after they had information about their opponents. There were many restrictions on sects with Celestial Luck Banners in the Celestial Luck Banner battle, but there were no restrictions on itinerant sections. In other words, all restrictions were lifted. The winner was king, and the loser was a thief. To obtain the qualification to challenge for the Celestial Luck Banner, one must first struggle out of the bloody martial world. The process was already full of the survival of the fittest, so one could do anything, and the restrictions were meaningless. Based on this creed, the residents of 9 Supremes received 13 challenge letters in a day as soon as the Celestial Luck Banner battle began. They were all challenges that they had to fight. However, the problem was that there were bound to be losses in battle. No matter how strong their combat strength was, could they be unscathed in the face of such continuous challenges? Not fighting? They could, but not fighting meant losing the qualification to challenge sects with Celestial Luck Banners in the future. Could they not fight? On the other side, in the territory belonging to the Sacred Soul Palace, a legend had quietly risen and spread like wildfire. An organization called the White Robes Alliance had begun to rise and expand rapidly. Knowing that the war was imminent, Shi Wuchen and the rest naturally focused on teaching their disciples. Even if they did not consider the upcoming Battle of the Celestial Banners, just the training of the disciples between the 9 peaks was already an element of inconspicuous competition. Hence, the 9 peaks were in a frenzy. From the whetstones of the down-and-out martial world to the absolute higher-ups of the residence of 9 supremes, the Demiurge Flawed 10 were rubbing their palms together with a burning fighting spirit, eager to make contributions and live up to the recognition. In addition, they were also very satisfied with their newly recruited disciples. Although these disciples had a shallow foundation and were almost starting from scratch, not only were these children gifted, but their perseverance and tenacity were also extraordinary. A few of them had quietly broken through their chakras on the night of the 9 Supremes' return, and there were even miraculous geniuses who had broken through 2 or 3 chakras. This reality, of course, made the Demiurge Flawed 10 even happier. Geniuses. They were obviously a bunch of geniuses. However, no matter how much of a genius they were useless now. Although the other 8 peaks and 8 supremes had disciples who were slightly older than Yun Yang, the oldest among them was only a little over 10 years old. Shi Wuchen and the others felt that they would not be able to pass the test of sending such children to battle. In the Celestial Luck Banner battle, the higher-ups participating in the battle had to at least have the cultivation base of a saint. This was not the standard, but, if one did not have the ability to fight when the others had already surpassed this cultivation base, one might as well not even fight. Otherwise, one would only be courting death. This was a battle of raw strength. There was no element of luck to speak of. No matter how lucky one was, in the face of an absolute gap in strength, even if one could be lucky once or twice and be lucky all the time, a slight misfortune would mean death. The battle formations that participated in the battle were the core disciples of various sects, and the disciples who participated in the battle had to have at least the cultivation base of a supremacy, although each of them was only a first-level supremacy. There was almost no one who was higher than 1 level, and they were not even as good as little fatty Qian Duo who had just met Yun Yang. However, the highest cultivation base of the residence of 9 Supremes' disciples was only a heaven mystic. Chapter 1004. To put it bluntly, it would be that, according to an ordinary person's cultivation speed, after training for 200 years, they would probably be able to participate in the war. The cultivation atmosphere in the residence of 9 Supremes was undoubtedly excellent. The spiritual qi was thick like liquid, and one's cultivation base could be improved with just 1 breath. However, one needed time to improve. Judging from the current situation, they would not be able to make it to the Celestial Luck Banner competition half a year later no matter what. Moreover, before the competition, there was still the qualification outpost for the elimination battle of the martial arts world. The entire residence of 9 Supremes was cultivating diligently, determined to advance. The teachers were meticulously urging, teaching, and learning, and the disciples were doing their best to improve themselves, yet, someone had to come knocking at their door at this time. Outside the mountain gate, a long howl shook the heavens as a warning sign sounded. The challengers' sect had already arrived. Kong Luoyue, bring your disciples and eliminate one of the challenging sects. Shi Wuchen sat in his hall and gave the order, his face expressionless. If he had not experienced it himself, he would not have imagined the unique communication system of the residence of 9 Supremes. After trying it out, he marveled inwardly that the communication in the residence of 9 Supremes was so convenient. He was sitting in his own peak, but the order had already been delivered to Kong Luoyue. There was not even a moment of delay. Awesome! Shi Wuchen had already planned to teach his disciples, but after some thought, he added, fight more cruelly and bloodily. A one-sided battle won't train anyone. Kong Luoyue's face contorted when he heard that. F***ck. If he had known earlier, he would have gone to Tiancan and Deke. As the 9th elder of the residence of 9 Supremes, all the dirty and tiring work would be his, and he would be the frontline officer. Although he had expected it, he did not expect it to come so soon. I haven't even settled down yet, however, there was no other way. This was an order from the sect, and there was no room for negotiation. If the leader did not speak, Shi Wuchen had the final say. This was the authority of the second supreme. Kong Luoyue led 10 disciples and walked out with a gloomy expression. Let's go, I'll bring you to witness the martial world's killing. This is the first battle since the founding of the residence of 9 supremes. It's significant and must not be underestimated. Among the 10 disciples, the oldest was only 15 or 16 years old while the youngest was only 7 or 8 years old. They did not show any signs of fear or retreat, instead, they followed behind Kong Luoyue excitedly. Finally, could he witness the legendary Jianghu? Outside the door. The leader of the Black Tiger sect was standing in front of the mountain gate with 30 to 40 people from his sect, his face dark. Was the residence of 9 supremes too arrogant? Generally speaking, as long as you accept this kind of challenge, aren't you going to invite us in? Why hasn't the great mountain guarding formation been activated to welcome us in? There hasn't even been a greeting. What kind of explanation was that? There were more than 10 groups of people waiting in the forest behind him. When they saw the awkward expressions of the people from Black Tiger's sect, they took pleasure in their misfortune. If you wanted to pick it up for a moment, you would fight to be the first one. Are you ashamed now? Let's hope that the residence of 9 supremes works hard and defeats the Black Tiger sect. Otherwise, we'll have to travel far and wide to find the next one. The leaders of a few sects had already begun to look around at the people from the other sects with malicious intent. These sects were all meritorious services, and also had the qualifications to do so. When the residence of 9 supremes was dealt with, why not sweep away the dozen or so sects that came knocking on their door in one go? They did not have to sweep all of them. As long as they could gather 10 victories, they could participate in the Celestial Luck Banner contest. This was a golden opportunity, how could they let it go so easily? Kong Luoyue appeared in front of the residence of 9 supremes with a head full of complaints and a dark face. Once he appeared, he stood with his arms folded and said impatiently, "Who's here to challenge the residence of 9 supremes? Come forward quickly. I don't have so much time to waste on you." The leader of the Black Tiger sect took a step forward and said loudly, "I'm Enchanting, the leader of the Black Tiger sect." "Who are you? What is your position in the residence of 9 supremes?" "You must know that I'm the Celestial Luck Banner." Kong Luoyue said with a dark face, "You're the one who came to challenge us. Are you going to fight or not?" "Who are you?" Enchanting asked angrily. Kong Luoyue said lazily, "Have you heard of the Demiurge Flawed 10? Enchanting was baffled. "I'm Kong Luoyue." Kong Luoyue said, "Serene soul of 9 springs, one of the Demiurge Flawed 10, now the 9th supreme of the residence of 9 supremes. Do you understand?" Enchanting was getting more and more confused. Kong Luoyue said, "Can you understand human language? Are you going to fight or not?" Enchanting was still speechless. His mind was still in a daze. Since when did the Demiurge Flawed 10 become members of the residence of 9 supremes? Kong Luoyue leaped up and slapped, saying angrily, "It looks like you really can't understand human language. I'll fight if you don't want to." With a loud thud, Enchanting's face was covered in blood as he was sent flying by the slap. Chapter 1005. On the other side of the forest, there were many sounds of people sucking in cold breaths. There were noises coming from behind as well, but it was the sounds of vomiting that came one after another. Those who gasped were naturally the people from the other sections. "Aren't we just picking a pushover to bully? Why does it seem like we've met an iron bench? Help!" The vomiting noises were, of course, Kong Luoyue's disciples. No matter how talented the disciples were and how determined they were still a group of children in their bones. Their minds were pure and they were inexperienced in the ways of the world. Before this, they had never seen much fighting in the Jianghu, let alone such a bloody scene where blood could be seen with every blade. Who could stand the stench of blood that came with the wind? Suddenly, their eyes were filled with crimson and blood. The group of boys and girls paled, without exception. So, when their master said that he would bring them to see the martial world, he meant to let them see a massacre? Facing the blood and death at every turn? The martial world's rule is that the victor is king. Kong Luoyue's expression was grim, the soul assassin in his hand gleaming as he said faintly, "The Black Tiger sect has come to challenge us and I've killed them all. The martial world's grudge ends here. Disciples, go, chop off all their heads." The 10 boys and girls were dumbfounded when they heard him, their gazes dull as they stood rooted to the spot. Chop off the heads of the dead? Was he so cruel and merciless? "I'll count to 10. Whoever can't do it will be banished from the residence of 9 Supremes from today onwards." Kong Luoyue said faintly, 1, 2, 3, 4, he continued counting without pause, not leaving any leeway. The 10 disciples were still dumbfounded, but they had no time to think as a bolt of lightning flashed through their minds. With a howl, they dashed out like a swarm of bees. In the forest, someone said sternly, "The martial world's grudge ends in death. Why do you have to cripple the corpses? Kong Luoyue, don't go overboard." Kong Luoyue's expression did not change as he continued counting, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. "Stop." When Kong Luoyue told them to stop, it was the girl who was the last to leave. She had severed the neck of a Black Tiger sect disciple on the ground and stood up with the head in her hand. Her pretty face was pale and she was trembling all over. However, she held the head tightly in her hand, shaking it against the wind without letting it go. End is pinched tightly. Looking at her pouting little mouth, it seemed like she would burst into tears at any time. Kong Luoyue's hawk-like eyes landed on the girl's face, not saying a word for a long while. Other than the little girl, the other 9 disciples were also holding human heads in their hands. Their faces were pale and their bodies were trembling. Their conditions were not much better than the little girl's. Carrying the head, the little girl trembled all over. Suddenly, she strode over and cried out in a trembling voice, "Master, I didn't exceed 10. Kong Luoyue's face was as cold as steel, unmoved and still silent. The little girl ran to Kong Luoyue's side as if her life depended on it. Suddenly, a cold glint flashed. A crescent-shaped machete appeared in the air and slashed at the little girl's neck, full of murderous intent. Kong Luoyue only watched coldly, unmoving. The little girl was about to reach Kong Luoyue's back. However, just as they were about to pass each other, the flying dagger that originated from the forest attacked with force. Honestly speaking, although the ambush was unexpected, Kong Luoyue's current cultivation base and ability could have deflected the flying dagger with a single move. However, his face was cold and he did not move, coldly watching the flying dagger fall in front of him. The little girl did not stop running but was about to lose her life to the flying dagger. Kong Luoyue was unmoved. Clang! With a loud clang, a sword blocked the fatal flying dagger at a hair's breadth. What followed was a wail of agony. It was a 13 to 14-year-old youth who had come with the residents of 9 Supremes this time. He took a step forward and blocked the flying dagger with the sword in his hand, saving the little girl's life. Although he had saved the little girl, he was counterattacked by the strong force of the flying dagger. Not only did it shatter the youth's sword, it had also entered his body and devoured his meridians. The youth cried out, his body shuddering violently as he spat out 3 mouthfuls of blood. Then, he fell backward. "Seen your brother by." The little girl shuddered, her eyes filled with disbelief as she screamed, tears rolling down her cheeks. It was only when the youth fell that Kong Luoyue reached out and caught him. He looked at the 10 disciples coldly and said faintly, "You can't bear it anymore? Can you bear to watch your brother be killed with a single slash?" The remaining 8 disciples flushed, not only out of shame but also shame. Kong Luoyue's chilling voice rang in everyone's ears. "This is the martial world. If I don't die, the enemy dies. If the enemy doesn't die, I die." Kong Luoyue held the unconscious youth and said faintly, "Retreat." The 9 disciples shuddered again, looking up at Kong Luoyue in disbelief. A few of them cried out hoarsely, "Master!" The enemy had ambushed their own junior sister and caused their senior brother to be gravely injured, his life hanging in the balance. Yet, their master was going to retreat just like that? Kong Luoyue said coldly, "Revenge? It's not your turn yet. Your performance just now was too cowardly and weak. The sect has asked us to return. What happens next doesn't belong to us anymore. Do you feel aggrieved now? What did you do earlier? All of you, return with me. Or do you want to hear me say it again?" Kong Luoyue held the injured disciple in one arm and beckoned the remaining 9 disciples back with a stern face. The little girl who returned last was already teary-eyed as she rushed forward. "Master, how is senior brother Bai?" Kong Luoyue replied indifferently, "So what if he's fine? If you had completed your mission earlier, why would you be asking about your senior brother now? Why are you spouting nonsense that doesn't help the situation?" He tilted his head to look at the little girl, his voice as cold as ice. "If you don't want anything to happen to your senior brother and junior brother, then behead your enemy early. Do you remember that?" The little girl was shaken. "Yes, master." "Humph. Go back. Master, we want revenge. Your actions have disqualified you from talking about revenge." Kong Luoyue said faintly, "The only thing you have to do now is to return with me and not talk nonsense." Chapter 1006. Kong Luoyue's 9 disciples' eyes brightened as they pleaded, "Master, can you watch Senior Uncle Shi avenge my senior brother? Please, Master." Kong Luoyue's expression was steely. "Don't all of you understand human language? Don't you know what it means to be unqualified? Revenge isn't your business. You have no right to question what others did or didn't do what you shouldn't do. Go. Don't make me waste another word." Without another word, he forcefully led his 9 disciples away. The 9 disciples gritted their teeth, tears streaming down their cheeks, but they could not do anything. The only thing they could do was to leave with Kong Luoyue. However, a seed was planted in everyone's hearts. This was the martial world. If the enemy did not die, I would. If I did not die, the enemy would. Qualification was strength. Those who were not strong enough could only shed tears. They did not even have the right to watch the enemy's head fall. This was the real martial world, the cruelest reality. They kept turning back to delay with every step, hoping to hear the sound of Senior Uncle Shi's killing spree. However, their wishes were destined to be in vain as they returned to the 9 peaks before they even heard it. At this moment, everyone's hearts were on the verge of exploding. Kong Luoyue said faintly, "Continue cultivating." Before his voice faded, he returned to his palace without a second thought. As for the injured youth, he was thrown in front of the hall by Kong Luoyue. He was still lying on the ground, drenched in blood and unconscious. Only the slight rise and fall of his chest signified that he was still alive. The youths glared at him, but none of them dared to disobey their master's orders. They could only watch with bloodshot eyes as their brothers struggled to stay alive while they cultivated with all their might. If you don't cultivate diligently, if you don't try your best to improve, the only result will be misery. The ones who will be lying here in the future will be your brothers and sisters, or even yourself. You're a burden to others and yourself, wasting resources for nothing. Kong Luoyue's voice was cold and merciless. This child overestimated himself. He was like a mantis trying to stop a chariot, seeking his own death. He had nothing to do with anyone and was even implicated by his brothers and sisters. He deserved to die. However, considering that it's your first offense, I'll be merciful. If you can improve by 1 level, I'll make an exception and save his life. If you can't improve, then let him die in front of you. You caused him to be injured, and then sat back and watched him die. He only has himself to blame. He deserves to die, and I will not blame you. His bloodied brother's body was right in front of him. If he couldn't make a breakthrough, his brother wouldn't be able to live. The 9 young boys and girls simultaneously circulated their martial arts with all their might. With only one thought, they cultivated and broke through. In the hall, Kong Luoyue watched the 9 disciples fighting for their lives on the square outside the hall. Relief flashed across his cold gaze. Looking at the disciple lying on the ground whose blood vessels had been sealed by him, the disciple looked extremely miserable and bloody from head to toe, but in fact, he was only temporarily unconscious. He snorted twice and murmured, "You've inspired all your brothers and sisters. You've stood out for a moment and become quick-witted for a moment. You've achieved this opportunity and prestige. This is your opportunity, but also their opportunity." Shi Bujia took a step forward and bellowed, "Who ambushed and injured the residents of 9 Supreme's disciples? Stand up straight. King Hell, have you all eaten the guts of a leopard?" The young disciples who followed behind Shi Bujia were grief-stricken as well. They shared the same thought. Their brothers who had been born together with them had actually been ambushed and beaten to a pulp by the enemy right before their eyes. If not for their master and uncle master, how many of them could have survived? The eyes of the 10 disciples were filled with rage, unable to contain their anger. Shi Bujia's method of education was different from Kong Luoyue's. Kong Luoyue's method was to turn his grief and indignation into strength and bring his men away, allowing the rage to continue to motivate his disciples. Shi Bujia, on the other hand, used Kong Luoyue's method to skip a step, but the effect was the same. On the other side, the Flying Dagger school members who had launched the sneak attack were all indignant. Although the Flying Dagger just now was a sneak attack, the assailant had already assessed the distance and position. Based on the ability Kong Luoyue had displayed earlier, he could have easily blocked the Flying Dagger and saved the little girl, but it was also equivalent to keeping Kong Luoyue here. With the combat power Kong Luoyue had expended in slaughtering the Black Tiger sect, the Flying Dagger school, which was slightly stronger, would naturally have a higher chance of winning if they waited for him to exhaust himself. They could then use this to establish the Flying Dagger School's reputation and even accumulate the number of people they needed to kill. Unexpectedly, Kong Luoyue had left without a care, and now another one had jumped out, using their school as a tool to educate their disciples. This matter was absolutely shameful. Naturally, the Flying Dagger School members could not wait to jump out. Shi Bujia said coldly, "The Black Tiger sect has been completely wiped out. Why isn't it recorded in the Celestial Luck Banner?" With a wave of his hand, the Celestial Luck Banner that represented the residents of 9 Supremes appeared above him. A whirlwind stirred, and a shadow of the Celestial Luck Banner rose from the corpses of the Black Tiger sect members, turning into green smoke and fusing with the residents of 9 Supreme Celestial Luck Banner. A number appeared on the residents of 9 Supreme Celestial Luck Banner. 1. It was a sign that a sect had been defeated, simple and brutal. Shi Bujia lifted his head abruptly and stared at the Flying Dagger School disciples before him, grinning savagely. "I'm Shi Bujia of the Demiurge Flawed 10. Without waiting for a reply, he drew his sword and charged forward. "Time is of the essence. Who has the interest to dawdle with you guys?" It was more important to kill these fellows as soon as possible. For a moment, blood splattered everywhere, filling the sky with crimson. The combined ability of the Flying Dagger School was only slightly stronger than that of the Black Tiger sect. Otherwise, there was no need for them to ambush Kong Luoyue. They were merely planning to wait for the enemy to tire themselves out, hoping for a fluke that did not have much chance of winning. Now that they were up against Shi Bujia, who was even stronger than Kong Luoyue, they were in an even worse position. The Flying Dagger School had always been known for their concealed weapons, and the greatest taboo for a sect that specialized in such weapons was nothing more than close-range combat. Yet, what Shi Bujia was best at was close-range combat. In just a short while, the battle was already one-sided. Watch as I avenge your brothers. But if you don't have the ability in the future, you can only wait for others to avenge you. Begging for external help is the most passive and helpless act of a coward. My disciples will never do that. Walking the martial world and facing life and death head-on is the true martial world. Sure Bujia's voice was as cold as Kong Luoyue's. In spite of this, the disciples did not utter a single word of complaint. Their faces were pale as they stared fixedly at the splattering flesh and blood. Master is right. This is the martial world. After the battle, the residents of 9 Supreme Celestial Luck Banner changed to another number. 2. Chapter 1007. Starting with Kong Luoyue's poor performance, the Supremes of the residents of 9 Supremes stepped out one after another. The shock experienced by the dozens of sects waiting outside was unparalleled and soul-stirring. The residents of 9 Supremes was a newly established sect, and its registered master was a country bumpkin who had just ascended to the bound of universe. It had only been established for less than half a year, and it was the softest persimmon in everyone's hearts. But why did the Demiurge Flawed 10, who were renowned for their ruthlessness, jump out as soon as the challenge began? If they wanted to jump out, so be it, but the Demiurge Flawed 10's ability was more than a notch higher than the legend said. No, it was more than twice as strong. It was like a nightmare. A collective nightmare for all the sects who wanted to challenge the residents of 9 Supremes. We came here confidently to gain experience, but in the end, we came to give experience to our target? What was this? Although the Demiurge Flawed 10 was regarded as a whetstone by the various sects, they were all experts to these unranked sections. Moreover, their cultivation base had actually doubled. When it was Shi Wuchen's turn to fight, the remaining 4 sects outside had lost their will to fight. As the Demiurge Flawed 10 made their moves, 7 sects were all defeated in front of the residents of 9 Supremes Mountain Gate. Everyone was almost numb from watching this. How could they continue to repeat the same mistakes? They were going to die, one after another. Don't fight, we're just here to watch the show, just to watch the show. The 5 to 6 sects outside said in unison, besides, we don't plan to participate in the Celestial Luck Banner contest. We're just here to see the gap. When they said this, the leaders of the sects felt their hearts bleed. Come here to watch the show excitedly. What was the difference between denying one's qualification and offering it to someone else with both hands? It was an extremely sullen feeling, but they had to bury it in their hearts, not daring to let it leak out, lest it gave the strict opponent in front of them an excuse. However, looking at the increasing number of corpses outside the residence of 9 Supremes Mountain Gate and the thickening smell of blood, everyone felt as if a bucket of cold water had been poured over their heads, enlightening them. No matter how humiliating and depressing they were, it was better than becoming corpses, was it not? The first few batches of people from the residence of 9 Supremes were like gods of death, leaving no one alive throughout the whole process. Every time they attacked, they would kill. The first 7 sects had sent at least 30 people each, but none of them were spared. All of them had fallen in front of the residence of 9 Supremes, dead and on their way to the underworld. Their original intention was the same as theirs. They all wanted to conquer the residents of 9 Supremes and make it their stepping stone, so that they could gain experience in the battle of the Celestial Luck Banner. Without exception, all of them had become the stepping stones of the residents of 9 Supremes. Perhaps the sects they challenged at the beginning were relatively limited in strength and not very strong, but later on, they would only fight when they thought they had absolute confidence. After all, how could they fight for the Celestial Luck Banner if they did not have much confidence? In spite of this, the outcome was the same. The Demiurge Flawed 10 of the past and the 8 Supremes of the current residents of 9 Supremes were each stronger than the last. They were so strong that they could only look up to them and had no desire to compete anymore. They would rather give up against their will, almost like wagging their tails and begging for mercy, struggling at death's door. This was the supremacy of strength. Blood flowed in front of the residents of 9 Supremes, and the corpses of more than 200 experts of the martial world lay in a mess. Reality once again proved this point. Shi Wuchen's eyes narrowed. He did not expect that when it was his turn to lead his disciples to fight, these fellows would all cower. Shouldn't the sect that stayed until the end be the strongest among them? Why did they cower? This should not be the case. It did not make sense. How could he train his disciples if they cower? Forget it. Go and clean up these corpses, Shi Wuchen ordered. Remember to search each corpse carefully. This time, they were the ones who provoked us. There's no such thing as giving up their lives for their wealth. These are all our trophies, no doubt about it. Our sect is still in the early stages, so we can't waste any resources, including weapons and clothes. Nearly 200 people from the 5 sects who were lucky enough to escape the disaster stood where they were like clay sculptures, watching 10 fair-skinned boys and girls rummaging through, searching the blood-drenched battlefield. Everyone had a strong urge to vomit. He flipped them over one arm and one leg, searching for anything valuable. It felt like they were searching themselves. If their own sect had attacked just now, would they not be the targets of the search as well? All the spectators could not help but feel like vomiting, let alone the 10 disciples who were carrying out the task. 10 youths who had not seen the world. Shi Wuchen's 10 disciples were all pale, looking no better than the 7 Supreme's disciples who had fought earlier. However, none of them stopped. Their movements were not sluggish or hesitant at all. Shi Wuchen's words were cold and grim. If the residents of 9 Supremes were defeated, you would be the ones lying on the ground now, and you would be the ones being plundered. The winner is king, and the loser is a thief. This is the survival of the fittest in the martial world. The winner lives and grows stronger to survive. Once defeated, you will become the spoils of war of the defeated. If you don't want to be defeated and killed, and don't want to become someone else's spoils, then you must grow stronger from now on. I can help you achieve victory today, but sooner or later, you will have to roam the martial world on your own, and face the cruelty of reality on your own. Kindness can exist in the heart, but unnecessary pity must be abandoned. Because this is the martial world. Reality will not be forgiven because of so-called pity and sorrow. Remember what happened today, and never forget it for the rest of your life. The people from the 5 sects stood aside, listening to Shi Wuchen teach his disciples as if there was no one else around. Everyone felt a chill rising in their hearts, lingering for a long time. At this moment, there was only one word left in their minds. Regret. The people from the residence of 9 Supremes gave off the feeling of a pack of hungry wolves that were full of savagery. The only thing they taught their juniors was blood and reality. Shi Wuchen finally left with his disciples. However, the blood on the ground was not cleaned up, and the corpses were still strewn all over the ground, looking even more ghastly than before. Yin Yang had not come out yet. What was left behind were all tools, excellent tools for teaching disciples. Although they were once living people, they had chosen to destroy the residence of 9 Supremes, and now that they had been killed and their corpses laid out on the ground, they had to pay the corresponding price. The price was not only their lives, but they had to become tools for the residents of 9 Supremes. Before and after death, they were tools to be used by others. This was the case with their lives, and so were their corpses. Chapter 1008. When Yin Yang came out with his 19 disciples, all he saw was a floor of corpses. The stench of blood was still overwhelming. It's too clean. Yin Yang was dumbfounded. How could these fellows do their jobs so cleanly? How am I supposed to educate my disciples like this? It was clear that there was nothing of value in it. Compared to Yin Yang's change of expression and exasperation, the 19 young boys and girls who followed behind him were pale and pale, almost unable to look straight at the sea of corpses and blood in front of them. These disciples were exceptionally talented, and they had the perseverance and tenacity. However, compared to the disciples of Shi Wuchen and the others, they had one shortcoming: they were even younger. If the disciples of Shi Wuchen and the others were youths, they would have to be classified as children. All of you are not allowed to close your eyes. Take a good look here and feel the life and death of the martial world, the reality of the secular world. Yin Yang said in a low voice, "The abilities of the dead here are much stronger than all of you. Feel it for me, and each of you must give me your thoughts when you go back." The 19 disciples were meditating. Yin Yang, on the other hand, was watching quietly. He could clearly feel the thick air of karma in the air turning into streams of air that flowed into his body and into his deific consciousness space. Emi spread its branches and leaves, absorbing the karmic chi without leaving anything behind. It was overjoyed as it absorbed the karmic chi. The air of karma produced by 218 people is more than the 3,000 and 30,000 people who died in Tianxian continent. It's the total annihilation of high-level cultivators indeed. Yin Yang felt all this and realized something. It's almost the same as the air of karma produced by killing people. Does this mean that the air of karma produced by the people of the residence of 9 Supremes after I've established it can be fully reflected back to me? With this discovery, Yin Yang could not help but feel invigorated. The only flaw was that the disciples of Shi Wuchen and the others had scared the hell out of them, so there were no more schools that challenged them. Yin Yang's plan to train his disciples could no longer be carried out. However, Yin Yang's disappointment only lasted for a night before it disappeared. This was because new challengers were popping up like mushrooms after the rain. The strength of the sects in the bound of universe was also divided into different levels. While there was a world of difference between the sects with and without the celestial luck banner, there was also a huge gap in strength between the sects without the celestial luck banner. However, many sects thought too highly of themselves, thinking that they were very capable, but their true strength was just as so, such as the Black Tiger sect and the Flying Dagger sect. The newly established residence of 9 Supremes, on the other hand, was a juicy piece of meat for the sects that intended to compete for the celestial luck banner. Naturally, it attracted the attention of many sects and schools. The other sects have a long history, at least 3 to 5 years of development. Only the residence of 9 Supremes has just been established this year. What ability and strength can it have? It's just right for me. The number of people and qualifications needed to compete for the celestial luck banner was not small, so naturally, it was better to have as few losses as possible. The target was also suitable for sects that had been established for a short period of time and did not seem to have much strength. Everyone had come with the same thought in mind, but it was a pity that they were sending themselves to their deaths. It had only been 2 days, but the residents of 9 Supremes had already defeated and slaughtered more than 10 sections. In this period of time, each of the 9 Supremes had shown up once, while Ping Xiaoyi and Guanuanyang had attacked once. Well, the so-called collaboration between Ping Xiaoyi and Guanuanyang was actually just Ping Xiaoyi attacking once. 3 to 4 sects were attacked indiscriminately, falling outside the residence of 9 Supremes' mountain gate. The residence of 9 Supremes remained standing. It was not an intention to stop the attacking sects, but those who came to challenge the residence of 9 Supremes realized that there was an additional luck character on the celestial luck banner. The character meant that the residents of 9 Supremes had already defeated 10 sects and obtained the qualification for the first round of the celestial luck banner. There was no longer a need for them to make up the numbers. In other words, the residents of 9 Supremes did not have to care about the challenging sects anymore. Even if a certain sect were to pick a fight with the residents of 9 Supremes or even defeat it, they would still not be qualified. Faced with such a situation, countless people who came in high spirits left dispiritedly. All of them were perplexed. The residence of 9 Supremes had just been established, so how could it have already gathered the quota to defeat 10 sects? Could it be that the residents of 9 Supremes had a powerful background and patron that had targeted many sects at once? Otherwise, how could it have gathered the quota so quickly? It was not until 3 days later that there was definite news. The residents of 9 Supremes, who had obtained the qualification for the first round of the Celestial Luck Banner contest, had defeated the Black Tiger sect, the Flying Dagger School, the 5 Peaks Mountain, and the Divine Wind sect, and had advanced by annihilating all of them. For a time, the residents of 9 Supremes' name spread like wildfire. It shook the Sacred Heart Palace's territory. Countless people were shocked. Was the residence of 9 Supremes not a little too intimidating? It was a newly established sect, but how could it be so formidable? There were also many sects that scoffed. It's one thing to be qualified, but it's not the same for their actual combat strength. Look at what the Residence of Nine Supremes has defeated. They're just a lucky guy who will be eliminated in the first round of the Celestial Luck Banner competition. No matter how shocked or disdainful they were, it had become a fact that the Residence of Nine Supremes could not be challenged. The sects that intended to challenge the Residence of Nine Supremes began to search for new targets. After achieving 10 victories, the Residence of Nine Supremes had obtained a rare buffer before the battle. Dong Qitian focused on refining pills while Yun Yang began to cleanse his disciples' marrows once again. The advancement of the Residence of Nine Supreme's strength was right in front of them. The mental state of the 99 disciples had improved tremendously. Compared to before, it was completely different. The sharp murderous intent was taking shape. In other words, the current Residence of Nine Supreme's disciples might not be as strong as their peers in other sects, but they had already surpassed them in terms of valiance. It was a kind of sharp edge. It was then that the General Commerce League's people arrived impatiently again. This time, Lang Fantian brought a dozen people with him, hurrying over like a shooting star. "Brother Yun, it's half a month's time." Lang Fantian's impatience was obvious. Yun Yang, on the other hand, looked troubled. "But I haven't gathered everything here. Can't I wait a little longer?" His expression was filled with reluctance. There was even a hint of helplessness. "I've gone out to run some errands these few days. The season has changed. My wife said she has no more clothes, so I accompanied her to Shanghai to buy a few. I didn't drink, I really didn't. I just got home. As Singles' Day is coming, I didn't say it because I was afraid that everyone would say I'm abusing the dog. There was a saying that went, the husband earns the money and the wife spends it. Not a single cent of the family's funds were used for this shopping trip. The personal savings that I've accumulated from my salary of a few thousand yuan every month over the years were all gone." Chapter 1009. Don't worry, Brother Yun. All the required resources will be gathered by the General Commerce League. Lang Fantian's grin was tinged with urgency. "In fact, we've already gathered a lot of resources. The quality is much better than the previous time. The key now is whether Brother Yun can bring out the chi of vitality this time." I really can't guarantee this. The preciousness of the chi of vitality is beyond my expectations. Brother Yun. You have to help me this time." Lang Fantian looked anxious. "The other treasures are secondary. We must have the chi of vitality to help Elderly recover his cultivation base. The General Commerce League's future depends on this. It won't come again if we lose it." Why is it so serious?" Yun Yang was baffled. This was not what he had said previously. Although Yun Yang had said that he was confident in obtaining another chi of vitality, he had never said that he could succeed. Was the current situation not overestimating himself a little too much? Or was he forcing it? As for the General Commerce League's headquarters, after our higher-ups discussion, we think that if the two high reverends can fight together, our chances of winning the upper-class Celestial Luck Banner will increase by 20% from the initial 50%. Moreover, it'll be used as a surprise attack to catch the enemy off guard, increasing our chances of winning. Lang Fantian stuttered and did not elaborate, but Yun Yang was able to discern the gist of the matter with just a hint and understood it immediately. So that's how it is. The General Commerce League actually had the power to compete for the upper-class Celestial Luck Banner before this, even having a 50% chance of winning. It was only due to the lack of ace combat power that they dared not take the risk and gave up. The incident at the Residence of Nine Supremes, on the other hand, had allowed one of them to regain his youth, and there was a high chance that the other could do so as well. That was equivalent to having two more Ace Supreme Saint experts. This unexpected piece of good news immediately made the hearts of the General Commerce Alliance's upper echelons become active. This was an opportunity bestowed by the heavens. If Heaven Sword and Earth Saber had recovered to their peak power before the war, the General Commerce League's combined combat power would have skyrocketed. The upper-class Celestial Luck Banner is no longer a 50-50 chance of winning, but a high chance of winning. This was related to the future of the General Commerce Alliance. Since there was hope, how could they give up so easily? Therefore, the General Commerce League immediately decided to submit an application to compete for the superior class Celestial Luck banner. Moreover, this decision was made on the spur of the moment. In spite of this, the sudden decision had caught Lang Fantian, the deputy chief, off guard. He was flustered and at a loss. The crux of all this was Yun Yang. Yun Yang had casually given out a wisp of chi of vitality, triggering the General Commerce League's long-dormant ambition. At a time like this, they naturally had to obtain the vitality chi at all costs so that Li Yisan could recover at the same time. Only then could Old Man Zhang and Old Man Li join forces to fight and become an absolute advantage for their side. Lang Fantian's arrival this time could be said to be shouldering the glorious mission of the General Commerce League. This pressure made Vice Alliance Master Lang feel a mountain of pressure, and it was difficult for him to deal with it. Is it too late for me to say that I'm actually not confident and I don't dare to guarantee anything at all? Yun Yang shook his head, wanting to retreat. If the first time isn't enough, we can do it twice. If the second time isn't enough, we can do it thrice. Brother Yun has said that he's confident before. Can't we try thrice? Lang Fantian's gaze was burning. His words made Yun Yang understand that the resources Lang Fantian had brought this time were not just better than the previous time they entered the spirit's grave. It was possible that they could handle 3 or 4 times. What an extravagant expenditure. Yun Yang could not help musing as he thought about it. There was a momentary silence, a tinge of awkwardness. After some time, Yun Yang said through gritted teeth, "I'll try my best." In spite of it, his expression was as dark as still water, showing no signs of relief. Yun Yang's pretense was not without purpose, it was necessary. Although obtaining the vitality chi was a piece of cake to Yun Yang, it must not be known to anyone, including the 8 Supremes, Little Fatty Qian Duo, and the other higher-ups of the residence of 9 Supremes. There must not be any chance for the secret to be leaked. Prior to this, Yun Yang had tried his best to overestimate the vitality chi's effect and possible situations, but now it seemed that he had still underestimated it. The Commerce League knew that Yun Yang's entry into the spirit's grave was rather limited, and that it would not be beneficial in the long run, but they still insisted on Yun Yang's actions. They even did it again and again. It could only be said that the benefits were more important than the sky, everything else was irrelevant. Yun Yang even had some unpleasant thoughts. After considering what he had said before about the pros and cons of entering the spirit's grave, the General Commerce League's decision and insistence on doing so were basically squeezing him dry, and he was basically quenching his thirst with poison. Of course, the actual situation was not as such. The more transactions there were, the more Yun Yang would be happy to see. However, there was a fundamental difference between the situation being led by Yun Yang and the other party. The stakes were huge. With Yun Yang's intelligence, how could he not know the pros and cons? Hearing that Yun Yang had relented, Lang Fantian was overjoyed. "Thank you, Brother Yun. Thank you for your generosity, Brother Yun." He then proceeded to introduce the entourage to Yun Yang. Other than the few who were already with the General Commerce League, there were 8 more who were the 8 guardian warriors of the General Commerce League. They came forward to greet Yun Yang. Greetings were normal and irrelevant, but when Yun Yang noticed the person in the middle, the 5th of the 8 guardian warriors, Xiao Jianghu, he felt that something was not right. Xiao Jianghu had a burly figure and a graceful bearing. Although he tried his best to appear cautious when interacting with others, his inner qualities did not match his performance at all. "This is Xiao Jianghu." Yun Yang smiled and was full of praises. "What a great name. Xiao Jianghu, Xiao Jianghu, Xiao Jianghu. Such a taboo name, innately domineering. A sword to conquer the martial world. A good name." Xiao Jianghu replied, "Sect leader Yun, you flatter me. A name is only a nickname. It's just a fluke." Yun Yang chuckled and said, there are good and bad names. It's normal, but some can bear the burden of their name while many can't. It depends on a person's fate. Xiao Jianghu chuckled as well and said, I haven't studied this before. Lang Fantian chuckled and said, how can there be so many details about a name? It's not worth laughing about. Brother Yun, what do you need to enter the spirit's grave this time? Are you still charging the same price as last time? Chapter 10:10. Yin Yang smiled faintly. It's hard to be content with one's greed. This is an unavoidable mentality for any cultivator or human being. Even I can't avoid it. However, I really don't wish to trade too many resources this time. Since all of you have come personally, let's set the upper limit at 900,000 worth of resources. What do you think? A considerable portion of the last million worth of resources was Yun Yang's commission. This time, 100,000 was deducted. Nominally, Yun Yang's commission was reduced by 100,000 upper-class spiritual jade pieces, but in actual fact, the total value of the traded resources was set at 1 million. It was almost double of the previous transaction. The previous time was 600,000 while the rest was Yun Yang's commission. Once the commission was collected, it could not be reduced anymore. It looked like a concession of 100,000, but it was actually an increase of 400,000. A concession of 100,000 was still an increase of 300,000. Moreover, it was only a concession of 100,000 this time. The future transactions were still 1 million. It was an exorbitant demand. The General Commerce League and the others looked at each other, their faces pale. This was Yun Yang's immediate retaliation. I've already made it clear that it's not good to open the spirit's grave too frequently. It's only been a few days and the General Commerce League can't wait anymore, even requesting to open the spirit's grave again and again. Where do I stand? Of course, I have to set a limit on the total value of the traded resources. To Yun Yang, this was understandable. A transaction should be fair and just. If one party were to compromise, the other party would only be more aggressive and exploit them further. How could Lang Fantian not understand this? With an inward sigh, he chuckled dryly and said, of course, we'll follow Brother Yun's wishes. The General Commerce League's need for the chi of vitality is too urgent this time. It's been hard on you, brother. To Lang Fantian and the General Commerce League, Yun Yang had gained a lot from the recent transaction. Although the League's request this time was a little too eager, it was also in consideration of the bigger picture. Compromising a little would only strengthen the partnership, especially when Yun Yang had already received a lot of extra benefits last time. It would be best if he did not accept it this time, saving a sum of money for the General Commerce League. Unexpectedly, not only did Yun Yang not give in, he had even set a limit on the total value of the traded goods. It was as if he had turned the tables on the General Commerce League. The meaning behind Yun Yang's words was profound, containing 2 layers of meaning. Firstly, they were working together using real money. He would give as much as he was supposed to. This was set in stone. Secondly, it was the content of the transaction. If the League wanted to make multiple transactions within a short period of time, that was fine, but the total value of the traded goods had to be decided by Yun Yang. Other than Yun Yang's self-deprecation, he was also accusing the owner of the spirit's grave of having ulterior motives due to the frequent transactions. What should he do if there were no frequent large transactions in the future? Furthermore, there was Yun Yang's intention to mock the General Commerce League's eagerness for quick success, forcing them to do things that were beyond their control, and being dishonest in doing things. Lang Fantian and the others were veterans in the martial world. How could they not understand the true meaning behind the words? However, they were helpless against Yun Yang. After all, Yun Yang was the seller's market now. They could only suffer in silence. It was just a sentence, but it was equivalent to limiting the total value of the General Commerce Alliance's transaction. It might even cause the purpose of this transaction to fail and return in disappointment. The corners of Lang Fantian's lips twitched, but he did not speak. The General Commerce League's decision this time actually had another layer of consideration. They wanted to use this opportunity to test if Yun Yang's claim that opening the spirit's grave too many times would bring harm to himself was true. This was a crucial point. However, based on the current situation and Yun Yang's unyielding attitude, there was a 90% chance that this was true. Not only did this test cause them to suffer a great loss, they had also severely offended Yun Yang. At the very least, their relationship was no longer as harmonious as before. Yun Yang was still welcoming the General Commerce League's people into the guest rooms of the residence of 9 Supremes enthusiastically. Once Lang Fantian and the 8 Great Vidras entered the residence of 9 Supremes Mountain Gate, they were genuinely shocked. Their eyes were gleaming, filled with extreme disbelief and incredulity. After settling Lang Fantian and the others, Yun Yang excused himself and left without further pleasantries. Yun Yang had a lot of things to do now, especially to give these people time to react and space to communicate. The General Commerce League's action this time was reasonable and expected to Yun Yang, but the League's reaction to Yun Yang was not necessarily the same. What he should do now was to give the other a relatively private space to think about the future. After Yun Yang left, the General Commerce League's people gathered in a large circle. It was hard to tell who was in the lead. Lang Fantian stood at the side of the circle, deep in thought with a frown, his expression dark. Xiao Jianghu was the first to speak, saying in a low voice, "Why does this sect leader Yun seem to have seen through my identity?" Lang Fantian chuckled humorlessly. "It's not that I admire Yun Yang, but this sect leader Yun is a rare character in the bound of universe, be it in terms of scheming or tactics, despite his young age. It's not too surprising that he found something unusual about you, boss. Let's not talk about anything else. Just the decision he made just now is shocking, isn't it?" Xiao Jianghu said, "Oh? I didn't know you have such a high opinion of this sect leader Yun, Fantian." Lang Fantian sucked in a breath and said, "I thought the General Commerce League had some judgment on this sect leader Yun, but now I know that it's not the case. Do you know, boss, that when I first met Yun Yang, there were only 2 of them, but they'd already made a name for themselves as the Raiders of All But God? Even when they were doing business with the General Commerce League, the entire process was easy and smooth." Xiao Jianghu replied with a chuckle, "How can I not know this? If it weren't for the opportunity that day, how could we have met today?" Lang Fantian shook his head. "That's not the only reason I value this child. There are many secrets that can be unearthed from him, each of them earth-shattering secrets. Not only are our abilities far superior, but we also know the value of these secrets, but we dare not make a move. At most, we're probing carefully. Tracing back to the source, there are many unexpected factors, but most of it is due to Yun Yang's actions." Xiao Jianghu nodded and said, "That's true. I've heard Fantian say that this child is extraordinary. Although I thought that this child must have something extraordinary about him, I still underestimated him. Now, it seems that this child is truly remarkable." The residence of 9 Supremes was already taking shape when we met for the second time. Now, it's the third time, the residence of 9 Supremes is already taking shape. It's only been 2 to 3 months, but each time we meet, it's accompanied by a sense of wonder. All the wonder comes from the achievement he's made in such a short period of time. It's something that no one else can achieve. That's why I said that there's nothing surprising about him seeing through boss identity." Lang Fantian sighed. "On the contrary, I'd be surprised if he didn't." Chapter 10-11. Xiao Jianghu chuckled. "You mean Leader Yun pointing out my identity is a reminder to us?" "Yes. If he didn't point it out after seeing through it, we'd suspect his ulterior motives." Lang Fantian said frankly, "Now that he's seen through it and said it on the spot, it's equivalent to giving us information and his attitude. This child has always been steady, neither humble nor arrogant. His actions are well grounded, there's no need for him to show off." "That's true," Xiao Jianghu said after some thought. Lang Fantian said, "As for his attitude just now, from what I can see, it's reasonable as well. We've cooperated a few times and the transactions are huge. On the surface, Yun Yang's side has the upper hand, but in reality, more than 80% of the benefits he's obtained are given to the spirit's grave to obtain the most valuable treasures. The General Commerce League, on the other hand, is the one who can easily obtain the best treasures. Lang Fantian concluded, therefore, I think that such a collaboration is only beneficial to us. It can go on for a long time, and to do so, one of the prerequisites is to build a good relationship with Yun Yang. We mustn't trigger his resentment because of a momentary loss. Like this time, consecutive transactions within a short period of time are taboo for Yun Yang. We need to express our sincerity to make up for it later. Xiao Jianghu's gaze was thoughtful. After a long moment of thought, he suddenly changed the topic and said, the spiritual qi density of the residents of 9 Supremes right now. I'm afraid it's not much weaker than the General Commerce League's headquarters, is it? Lang Fantian was taken aback and answered after a pause, yes. Fantian, haven't you realized the difference? The reason our league headquarters has such a spiritual atmosphere is mainly because of the middle-class celestial luck banner, but the residents of 9 Supremes doesn't even have a lower-class celestial luck banner now. Xiao Jianghu said in a low voice, if the residents of 9 Supremes obtains the celestial luck banner, the spiritual atmosphere within the mountain base of the residents of 9 Supremes will definitely increase tremendously. It can at least be on par with the General Commerce League's headquarters. Does anyone here doubt this? Indeed, there's no doubt about it. But here's the problem. Even if the residents of 9 Supremes possesses a spiritual atmosphere equivalent to that of a middle-class celestial luck banner after obtaining a lower-class celestial luck banner, don't you think the commotion in front of us is a little ridiculous? Xiao Jianghu's thick brows knitted together. I can basically say that as long as there aren't any major changes, the residents of 9 Supremes will rise in the future and become a formidable foe to any sect in the bound of universe. The threat is huge. His words were filled with emotion. Lang Fantian kept quiet for a moment before he spoke. I think the chief is worrying too much. Xiao Jianghu tilted his head. Oh. Lang Fantian thought about it and spoke from the bottom of his heart. I have something to say that's stuck in my throat. Lang Fanyan's way of addressing himself changed again and again. At this moment, he no longer addressed himself by his real name, nor did he address himself as this seat, or subordinate. Instead, he suddenly changed the way he addressed Lang Fanyan to little brother during the conversation. This meant that the current conversation between the two parties had turned into a conversation between brothers. Speak, said Xiao Jianghu. Lang Fantian coughed and cleared his throat before he said, I think that Big Brother's current thinking is too utilitarian and has already deviated from the League's initial purpose of founding. Xiao Jianghu kept quiet for a moment, only looking at him without saying anything. The League's initial purpose of founding is to convey its name and ambition. The General Commerce League is both the League's name and the League's ambition. Although there's the grand idea of accepting merchants into the League, it's still mainly about business. Lang Fantian continued, it's the word of business that determines the League's essence. The bound of universe is obviously inseparable from the business world. Based on this principle, the League has developed rapidly, especially after going through the extreme hardships of starting a business. It's almost smooth sailing. The premise that we're the Commerce League has allowed us to have no fundamental conflict with other sects, aristocratic families, and sections. Since there's no fundamental conflict, they won't see us as a threat that must be eliminated. That's why we've come so smoothly until now. Even if we successfully ascend to the upper-class celestial luck banner this time, the Commerce League will still be the same to us. At most, we'll have more protection and fewer people will dare to covet it, but it won't change the League's own principle. This is the only way we can ensure the League's continued existence. Perhaps the residents of 9 Supremes will soar to the 9 heavens in the future, perhaps it'll dominate the martial world. To the other sects and forces, it may be a threat or even an enemy that can't coexist, but to the League, it won't cause too much damage. We can even complement each other's strengths with the residents of 9 Supremes and work more closely together. As the saying goes, a small clue can reveal a big picture. Based on the current situation, our cooperation with the residents of 9 Supremes is already constantly increasing the Commerce League's strength. In summary, this young brother thinks that the residents of 9 Supremes is not a threat to us. He had stated his meaning clearly, but he still came up with such a conclusion, making others feel that there was more to his words or that he had not finished. Finally, after a moment of silence, he gritted his teeth and said, "In addition, this young brother thinks that there's a limit to the League's development. We, on the other hand, can't go beyond this limit. Once we go beyond the limit, beyond the limits of this framework, we'll be faced with a calamity. But if we restrain ourselves, we might be able to continue existing for thousands of years. Just like counting 9 to 5, the dragon soars in the sky, it is the supreme form. But counting 9 to 9, the dragon will have regrets, it will decline from its peak. What we need to be is the dragon soars in the sky, not the dragon will have regrets." Lang Fantian finished his long speech in one breath, sweat already beading on his face. Many of the dozen people who were listening by the side were sweating as well. Lang Fantian was truly bold, to be so blunt with his words. It was truly a taboo. Xiao Jianghu had been listening with a dark expression, not speaking for a long time. After some time, he finally asked, "If that's the case, then, where do you think the General Commerce League's limit is?" Lang Fantian mustered up his courage and finally spoke, "Above the upper-class Celestial Luck Banner and below the gold-class Celestial Luck Banner. There are many who have attained the upper-class Celestial Luck Banner, and this is where our development reaches its limit. If we go beyond that, not only will we draw the attention of many supreme sects, but will also be feared by the palace level. The end of the world will come, and there won't be many days left." Xiao Jianghu hung his head, falling silent once more. You're tuning into the A Romantic Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.